Ames City Council meeting, special meeting on a workshop, which is a CIP presentation tonight to order. And we will turn it over to our city manager, Steve Shanker. And
Thank you, Mayor.
started. Thank you.
It's our pleasure to unveil our 5-year capital plan. This plan represents some of the major capital improvements for all the way through, believe it or not, the fiscal year of 2029-30. So we're planning ahead, as you like us to do, not only plan projects, but also how we're going to finance the budgets, the individual projects. I want to emphasize we're just going to take time to go over highlights by some of the departments. We don't want to go through every page on the book. We'll certainly answer any questions you have on all the pages if you do. I want to emphasize we're not asking you to take any action tonight. Typically, we wait until the next council meeting to get public response, which will be next Tuesday. But actually, we're not asking you to make final decisions on the plan until February 11th, which is the budget wrap-up. So there's plenty of time for the public to review the plan. It'll be on the city website, and people can give you some input before you make your final decision. I want to emphasize also that this is a plan. So what's important is the projects that you will see in the first year in 25-26 will actually be, if approved, will be inlaid into the budget itself. The remaining 4 years, we want to maintain the flexibility to move them forward and backward based on certain circumstances. Others that are in the last year could become first year and next year because of other priorities you might have, timing requirements for grants. They may be slowed down for the same reason, delay in development. So it is a plan other than in the last 4 years. So we need flexibility to move projects around. Okay, so we could start off, and you're certainly free to interrupt us at any time. But again, you're not going to be asked to make any decision, and the public comments will come next week if that's okay with you. We'll start off in the book. We're going to start off with fire safety, and Chief Higgins is here. Chief Higgins here. Right.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you Fire's 5-year capital improvement plan. We're going to be on pages 24 through 28 of your book. We'll get rolling here. Over the next 5 years, we're proposing 4 capital improvement projects. 3 of these projects should look familiar as they were in our 5-year CIP last year. The new projects we are introducing tonight is in the 5th year of our plan, and that's the replacement of our department's self-contained breathing apparatus. It's an SCBA. It's what the firefighters wear on their back. So when you see apparatus, we're not talking about our fire apparatus, but the self-contained breathing apparatus. And tonight, I'm going to keep my presentation pretty short. I'm just going to focus in on the replacement of our self-contained breathing apparatus, and then also just a little update on the fire station system replacement that we have. All right. The Stational Learning System project has been advanced. So we had actually advanced into the 1st year of our capital improvement plan. Unfortunately, it's becoming more and increasingly difficult to get replacement parts for the Stational Learning System. We're also continuing experiencing more and more system issues and equipment failures. We have also put together a more accurate cost estimate for this project by working with our Storycom contractor, who's also our radio system provider, who also just happens to sell fire station alerting equipment. So it worked out well. Also want to highlight that if we can stay within the Storycom contract, which the contract allows us to purchase additional equipment through that we can actually receive a 10% discount. And that's actually reflected on page 25 of the price that you see there. I also want to note that we have $80,000 that through expected carryover in this year's budget that we're hoping to put towards that project, which is actually brings it up to a $291,000 project. We'll jump into the self-contained breathing apparatus. The replacement of our SCBAs is a new project that we're proposing in year 5 of our capital improvement plan. It's going to be on page 28. Just a little bit about our self-contained breathing apparatus. It's an essential piece of life safety equipment that allows our firefighters to enter otherwise hazardous, life-threatening environments to save lives and mitigate the hazard. There are multiple regulatory regulation requirements for SCBAs from both the DOT, OSHA. They include annual system testing, 5-year hydrostatic testing for our cylinders, annual fit testing, and a 15-year lifespan. Here you can see we're just laying out all the components that make up an SCBA. You have the cylinder, the harness, and the face piece. We are also proposing that we replace our oldest SCBA air compressor at this time, which will be 28 years old at the time of replacement. Our supplied air respiratory system that we use for confined space rescue will also need to be replaced at that time. You can see in the upper left-hand side, that's the compressor. It's a little bit different than probably what you have in your garage at home. Granted, there's a lot of regulatory requirements that we have to have, quarterly testing for the air samples. In the middle picture is the actual cascade. That's where we put the cylinders in to fill them. And then on the right is the supplied air respiratory system for confined space rescue. With that, thank you so much for your time. Are there any questions that I can address with our capital improvement plan?
Thank you, Chief. Questions?
So what happens to the old apparatus, these SCBAs, when we retire them?
Yeah, so the cylinders are done. The DOT only allows you to have them for 15 years, and they have to be tested every 5 years for hydrostatic testing. The harnesses can be refurbished to some degree, but usually the technology is out of date. They're worn out. It'll all be off of warranty. And we're already starting to experience, as we come into year 10, just an increase in the number of and the cost of repairs that need to be made to the SCBA. So manufacturer has a 15-year lifespan on them. And so we want to maintain that since it's our respiratory protection.
So they're just going to our friends at Resource Recovery?
Well, the cylinders, they'll be disposed of. There's been some creative people will buy them and they make bells out of them or lights. They've gotten pretty creative. The harnesses, we try to donate or sell to another department that might be able to get a year or two by refurbing a few of them if they can.
Chief, I do have one question. So the system, this station alerting system, is this something that is protected from any kind of outside interference? Is it a self-contained system?
Not as much as it will be. So that's one of the reasons why we want to replace the system sooner than later, because right now the software that it's running, we're not able to do security updates with. So we have it protected as much as we can at this point in time, but that's why we advanced it so that we can have the security so no one can get into the system and the redundancies.
Are you aware of examples around the country where hackers have been able to interfere with such a system? Is that something you're aware of?
We are, yes, and we've actually worked with our IT department, and we've addressed the concerns as much as possible.
But I apologize, I may have asked the question right. Has this happened in other places in the country? There was a very famous example of a water system that was impacted, municipal water, but I am not familiar with on the fire system. And obviously, we're very protective of our police and fire systems. Are you aware whether a fire system has ever been compromised in terms of its alerting system?
I am not familiar with anything. I've not heard anything local or statewide or even national.
But what we're doing here will help create additional security for our system.
Absolutely. It'll create two other pathways for redundancy. In case one system goes down, we can still get dispatched through cellular or through fiber.
Great. Thank you for that.
Hey, Rich, we want to give credit to Iowa State University, how they participate in the financing of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of the apparatus.
Yeah, so as you're aware, I've been before you asking for apparatus, and we have two that are in our 5-year plan, replacing engine 2 and adding engine 4. Iowa State pays 25% of the debt service that we have on those apparatus, and have been great supporters throughout this process. And so we want to make sure that we give them credit for that.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate the presentation. Move on to animal control.
As Brian comes up, he'll go into specifics, but I want to remind you, we've been discussing about 5 different projects, long-term projects that we're discussing. But I think I got a sense from the council that the animal control shelter was the next big project you want to engage in. I usually don't like to put those projects in the CIP until there's some certainty of your support and possibility of getting it financed. So you'll notice that this project is being financed based on prior input you gave us, not with a referendum, but outside funding, donations, and some of your priority funding that we set aside in a separate fund. So I want to emphasize that and let Brian move ahead with the rest.
that pretty much covers the the information I was going to share. If there are questions, certainly the
The public doesn't know. I don't
right.
think.
So we had an update to the city council at the last regular council meeting where we provided you information about the timing of this project, the funding sources that we had put together in the preliminary budget. We're anticipating just shy of $4.5 million project, a third of which would be funded through donations. We're working on the fundraising effort for the project right now. And then, as Steve mentioned, the other sources would be the Council Priorities Fund. And then previously budgeted funds that the council had set aside for the exploration of a new animal shelter site. So we are in the process of working with our consultant to evaluate the former Eagles Loft building at 2715 Dayton Avenue. Preliminary indications are so far so good. We haven't heard any issues that would become showstoppers for proceeding with that strategy. But we'll get some more information here in the next couple of weeks, and we anticipate coming back to the city council in early February with information about the cost estimates, the conceptual designs, and then a decision about whether to proceed on executing the option to purchase that property, and then move forward with renovating it.
So there's some opportunities for naming rights for the total building and probably some of the major rooms inside that'll be coming forward, right?
Yeah, the council will remember you have a city naming policy for facilities, and it includes some provisions for certain facilities and components of facilities to be named for outstanding individuals or contributors to major capital projects and so forth. So we intend to use that as a guideline when we are bringing to you any recommendations along that front.
Question?
I just have one. The dog park is near where the animal shelter is currently. Is that part of our relocation plans or not at this time? Or,
At the moment, we anticipate the dog park continuing to function as it is now. I believe we put in place an access system that requires that people be in good standing with their dog park tag fee and their records and so forth before they can access the system. It's a remote system,
okay.
Which has helped with some of the management of the dog park. But I anticipate we anticipate continuing to utilize it at its current site.
Okay. Thank you.
Brian, what would be your best estimate in terms of when we would be able to move the facility out to the new location? Best case scenario.
I'm sorry, could you ask the question again?
Sure. So when would you, best case scenario,
Timing.
when we'd cut the ribbon on this?
Oh.
Is this a project 2026?
Yeah, probably 26, sometime in 26.
Okay.
I would imagine. There's still a lot of work that'll have to be done. The bones of the building are we think appropriate for what we anticipate using it for, and there's some components of it that will need to be touched less, but there are components, the program areas, the dog areas, the cat areas, that are going to require a pretty considerable amount of work. So we're going to have to work to go through the detailed design process, go through bidding, get a contractor on board, work through all the details of getting that construction underway, and it could be a while.
So that's probably fiscal year 26, 27.
Yeah, and just for reference, part of the reason why we wanted to pursue this approach, one is because it's an opportunity to perhaps complete this project with a smaller financial investment than if we constructed a purpose-built animal shelter from scratch. But two, it's also an approach that we think can be accomplished much more quickly than if we proceeded with waiting until November to do a bond referendum, receiving bond referendum approval, going through the process of designing and concepts and so forth. That would take much longer than utilizing the approach we're going through now.
Great. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep. Thank you.
We'll move on to electric services.
See how we get the slide.
slides up here.
Page 35, starting with, right? Or Brian, or Mr. Com?
Mr. Shanker. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. So we're going to talk a little bit about electric. And to start off, we're kind of at a transitional period. For 50 years, we've been burning refuse-derived fuel. And one of the things we're now working towards is what is the electric utility going to look like post waste to energy? And what are some of the things that we need to be looking at in terms of reliability to our customers, and then also meeting some of the obligations we have for transmission and our neighbors. As the council recalls, we did do a presentation to you back in December. First slide, please, or next slide, please. And we'll just touch on that ever so briefly. So if you recall, we talked about basically the direction that we're taking the utility. We're looking at three main drivers: the reliability of the system, in other words, keeping people's power on; affordability, we don't want rates to go up higher than what our customers can handle, but we also want to look at sustainability. So those are our three main drivers that we used this year when we were building our 5-year plan. And to be honest, it's beyond the 5-year plan. It's into 10, 15, 20 years. Next slide, please. From those three main drivers, again, we talked to council about this. We drove up, basically created a utility plan guidelines. We want to maintain the ability to serve our customers peak load. We want N-2 just means that we can have two main pieces of equipment out and still reliably serve our city customers. We want to keep our customer costs competitive to our neighbors and to the region so that we're not raising rates, again, out of line. We want to limit the reliance on overproduction to meet our green goals. And by this, in its basic sense, you could put in a bunch of wind that'll all turn on at a certain time, but it doesn't match up with our loads. You have a lot of wind, but it's not at the times when our customers are desiring it. So we want to avoid having to inject a lot of energy. And then serve as much of our city's electric load with green energy without compromising the other guidelines. Next slide, please. So in talking through tonight, we're looking at basically four main groups that we'll talk through. The power plant, because there's some nuances there, we're going to not only talk about our existing facilities, but we also then want to talk about proposed new generation that we're looking at. The number you see there is not incorrect. So in other words, that is a correct number. We're looking at an overall capital improvement plan over the next 5 years of $175 million. I will say this, and I'm going to emphasize it again, as we move out of waste to energy, there are savings there that allows us to cover capital or bond payments that allow us to do much of this without raising rates. When we start talking about renewable, we'll talk a little bit more on that, but there's actually enough transitional dollars that allow us to cover this and not raise rates. We'll talk about that. From an administration standpoint, neither of these are new. You saw these last year. Advanced metering infrastructure, that's a $6 million project. We're about to come back to council and announce the firm that we've chosen. The $6 million is actually over a 3-year period. As we talk to the developer, they think that they could have it installed in possibly even 2 years. So we're going to be looking, because the vast majority of the benefit of having that system in is having it out to as many customers as possible. And that's on page 35 if you have your sheets out. Electric vehicle infrastructure, we actually reduced that a little bit. We're finding more and more private sector entities building EV charging or electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the city. We still want to have some budget so that we can put them at places where we think they would bring the most benefit to our customers. Malls, possibly hotels, downtown area, possibly Sci-Town, the Link, and places like that. The way the numbers look right there is the budget for 2025 is $2 million. I kind of do this every year. And then the overall everything in the administration bucket is about 3.6% of the overall 5-year budget, if that helps. And I can go into more detail there. Next, I should point, whoops, I was going to point out the last slide. So that, got to go the other way. So that is actually our DC fast charger, level 3 charger that sits down just off of Highway 30 right now. I thought that was Curtis's Lightning sitting there. Maybe it's Corey's, I'm not sure, but it's great to see that there are 2 vehicles using that even today, doing that. Next slide. Nope, now you're going backwards, Curtis. Okay, all right. From a transmission standpoint, the first one, again, we were here last year talking about that. That's just the improvements to the 69 kV system. The second and third one, they're kind of bolded there. Hopefully you can make those out. It's called Prairie View Substation, and then Prairie View Ames Plant 161. Again, this is what we talked about at the end of December. ITC, which is the transmission company in the area for Alliant, is looking at building a substation in the Prairie View Industrial Park. For them to build that substation and for them to adequately serve their future customers, they actually need to tap our Ames plant to Ankeny 161 kV line, which is fine. They're also going to bring in some of their own lines, and there's some mutual beneficial by both of us working together. By us having a stake or a share in that substation, it gives us a continual direct interconnection down to Mid-American, but the substation and the line itself brings in another source of transmission deliverability to the city, which touches primarily on one of our key guidelines, which is maintain, if not enhance, the reliability to our system. So those 2 projects will be coming up in the next couple of years that the city needs to participate with ITC on those projects. To help visualize it, that white box in the bottom right corner, the red line is our existing 161 kV line that comes over from Boone at a substation called Boone Junction. The box on the left is Staying Road Substation down into Ames Plant, and then it goes down to Ankeny. The gray is the Prairie View substation, and then the lines that are going to connect to possibly Fernald, and they also have an Ames substation. This budget in 25-26, a lot of this is going to be happening in those first few years. That's why the budget's close to $6 million, a little bit over. Overall transmission expenditures over the 5-year budget will be about 11% of our overall 5-year budget. Next slide. If we're going to talk about transmission, which is the high voltage, distribution is the lower voltage. The street lights and line relocation is where we work and partner with Public Works as they come in and put in new streets. We're there putting in new infrastructure, possibly replacing lights. So we have $100,000 in each year to cover our costs associated with any kind of line movement that's needed for road improvements and things like that. The reliability improvements, Vet Med Substation, Mortensen, and Dayton are 3 of our substations. These have been on CIP projects for the last couple of years. There's nothing new to report there. Fiber optic replacement, that is actually a project. Our line that goes to Boone Junction, currently we communicate with ITC via radio, and they've said that they're going to abandon their radio program, so we need some direct fiber in there. With that money, we'll also replace some of our older poles, if you will, that need some replacement. So it enhances and improves the reliability of that line. The distribution management system is something we're looking going forward. That's not in next year's budget, but it's out a couple of years. With the addition of AMI, the advanced metering infrastructure, you're able to do with that fast communication, you're able to manage our distribution, communication, and operation of equipment much, much, much faster. And so we're looking in the later years to add that to our AMI and make it further beneficial for our customers. Interesting thing, if you notice the distribution, Not a lot of these projects are in this coming year. We're only budgeting about $100,000 in the distribution. A lot of them in the second, third, and fourth year of our 5-year budget. It's because we're focusing on transmission and the substations and things like that. Overall, the 5-year budget for distribution is 5% of our overall budget. Next one. All right. Power plant, I'm going to first talk about the existing systems that we have right now. None of these are bolded, so these projects you have seen in past years. Unit 8 turbine major overhaul. It's something that you want to do on a unit periodically, 5 years, or how many thousand hours? 5,000 hours? Okay, so periodically, obviously, you want to take a unit down. What you don't see up here is Unit 7 major and minor overhauls, because as we're looking at our system going forward, we are envisioning a time within the next 5 to 10 years where Unit 7 will be retired. That was a unit put in the 60s. And so there will be a time when we're not looking at doing any more major overhauls on Unit 7 at this time. The combustion turbine generator, we've got some slight improvements there in terms of communication. We're also looking potentially at like a preheat system. On a day like today, actually, we can run it because it's too cold for it to ice up. But there is a period in the operation where you don't want to run one of our units because they could ice up. You know, it's when they're in the 20s and 30-degree temperature. It's kind of interesting. And then the distributed control system upgrade is just something that we're planning for too. And that's different than a distribution management system. Here, budget is about $3.3 million in 25-26, only about 4% of our overall 5-year budget. That's the existing plant. Want to talk about new generation, both thermal and renewable. Next slide, please. Oh, I guess I don't yet. All right. Okay. Other things related to generation, which again, none of these are bolded, so they've been in here before. Coal yard reclamation. We're no longer burning coal. We do need to go over there and spend some money, clean that area up for a future site for possibly generation. Clearwater Pond, that's actually is a new project. When we stop burning RDF, we have a pond where the ash goes and things like that, and we're going to be basically cleaning that up and restoring that to native. Yeah, without the ash. Infrastructure that's been there before, plant building heat. Again, if we're not going to have Unit 8 or 7 on days like today, we would need something to maintain the heat in that building, whether it's a packaged boiler, whether it's electric heat, which I'm always in favor of, or something like that. That's what that project is. Load centers and breakers, plant relays, and plant building modifications. We've talked about those several times over the last couple of years. This is part of that previous slide, so the budget numbers and the percentage of the 5-year budget's the same. Next slide. Okay. New thermal generation. So as we talked about in December, generation serves two purposes: to meet your capacity obligations, meet the reliability to serve your customers, and then there's also generation that meets the energy requirements. Okay, wind and solar can't reliably meet the capacity obligations unless you marry it up with batteries and things like that, which makes it cost prohibitive. So we are looking at generation to replace Unit 7, plus our loads continue to grow. So we're looking at installing somewhere between 50 and 60 megawatts of new thermal generation. Some of it, they're components that would be dual fuel capable, so they could run on either natural gas or diesel. They also have the ability to burn partial hydrogen. So it could be 40% hydrogen if that comes to being. There's not enough hydrogen here today to do that, but it's something that we're looking at. They have the capability to fast start. Some of these units can be online in 10 minutes or less, 5 minutes or less. They're local. It was really important as we were studying different options to have it in the city of Ames, has a lot more benefit when you have a derecho or something like that than a unit in Ottumwa or somewhere else. So we're really looking at trying to keep it local and tied to our own grid. Meets the capacity obligations, like I said before, meets our load growth and things like that. I should point out, and this is a little deceiving. So that picture up there with the blue, that happens to be one of these types of engines. Now it happens to be on blocks, and those 4 people standing there are Curtis, myself, and a couple of our engineers. We went to Omaha where they did a similar thing where they put a series of these in to help back up and serve Omaha. The other pictures are existing units. We drove down to Creston, Iowa, where these units have been put in. Easy to maintain, easy to start, dual fuel capability, and they actually were running them when we were down there a few months ago. Again, to afford us $84 million is a large price tag, but to get 50 and 60 megawatts for that is a reasonable price. We would likely bond for that. We would bond for that. And again, the savings from waste to energy more than offsets the cost of paying for the bond payments. But this is about almost half of our budget over the next 5 years. The other thing I'll mention is it's not like we just jumped on and says these are called RICE engines or reciprocating engines. Staff has been working, we've got a couple of different consultants that we've been working with, and we've been looking at combustion turbines. We've been looking at combined cycles. We've been looking at this particular brand is Wärtsilä. There's another brand called MAN engines. Very, very popular in cruise lines. A lot of these units are what powers the cruise line ships and things like that. Very efficient, and they still are beneficial to the environment, but you're still burning fossil fuels to make them run. So we're looking at all of those. What we're favoring for several reasons are more of these RICE engines and a combustion turbine or combined cycle due to their, their plug and play, if you want to say it that way. But they're of a right size that we can put in 2 if we need them. We can put in 3. If you look at something like a combustion turbine or a combined cycle, you put that in about 150 megawatt increments. Easy or inexpensive to run, but we don't need 150 megawatts. So we've been doing that. We've also been running some studies to determine how often they would run compared to wind and solar. And there's a myriad of data that Curtis could probably spend 30 minutes going through that talks about the different opportunities that you'd have depending upon what generation we looked at. But staff is convinced, and we'll be talking more with council on this as we bring the projects to you in this coming year to talk about why this unit or why this company and things like that. We'll be talking more on that. Next slide. The other side, which we're actually excited about, is we do want to add renewable generation to our portfolio. Currently, we do have wind and solar. We have those currently under what are called power purchase agreements. From a certain standpoint, they work very well for us. Somebody else builds it, somebody else maintains it, and we pay a certain dollar amount for the energy. What has slightly changed, and it may change again here in the coming months, is the city has the capability to receive the same tax credits that the investor-owned utilities have. So there's money out there, like 30% federal government money for building things like this. Under the PPA, under the power purchase agreement, we don't see that money. That goes to the developer. So we're looking at both power purchase agreements and ownership in this. We'll be looking at both wind and solar. We're looking at adding between 30 and 50 megawatts of new renewable generation. If the Inflation Reduction Act continues, that will be a huge benefit to the generation that we're looking at. That will lower the costs immediately, either through investment tax credits or production tax credits. With some of these, to really get low-cost pricing, they're looking at 150, 200 megawatts of wind, So in all likelihood, we would need partnerships with somebody else. 200 megawatts of wind would be a large bite for us. But if we can work with other utilities and Iowa State's been a partner in all of our renewable energy, we would continue that. What we have in our budget right now is $50 million. We believe at today's prices, we could get probably 30 megawatts, but again, it all depends upon Inflation Reduction Act, tariffs. Some of this equipment, if you're talking solar, are not typically US made. That could have an impact on some of these prices and things like that. This is about 29% of our budget. Next slide. Thought this would be an interesting slide since this is something I think that Brian, I know, gets yearly. So we wanted to do a comparison of how is the energy mix? How is Ames supplied today versus what it'll look like 5 years from now? The chart on your left, basically, roughly half of our energy comes from our own generation. We're running the power plant at the end of Main Street. About 47% of that is on natural gas. We get about 3% from the burning of RDF, and then we have 10, 11 megawatts of wind. Everything else is imported via MISO, and that runs the gamut on where that energy come from, and it changes hourly. So what happens if council approves the budget and that we're proposing, and we get all of this built? Huge shift. Ames generation drops to about 15%. Our wind goes from 10% up to about 32%, or triples in the amount of energy that we're getting from renewables. We are looking at adding some additional solar, about 1.5%. And then our imported energy replaces a lot of our net generation. So just wanted to give you that. Last slide. Please let it be last slide. Okay. Key points, going back to those guidelines that we talked about. We're meeting the load growth needs with generation approved by MISO. So we're forecasting our load to grow over the next 5 to 10 years, and we will meet that and have some room for flexibility. We need local generation to meet that N-2 contingency. The new substation, new lines will give us the reliability that we have. So heaven forbid another derecho, we have multiple options to continue to serve. The savings from discontinuing waste to energy will pay for the generation we're proposing, the transmissions, the substations, those projects. And as council looks at how much renewables we want to add, we believe we can continue to grow our renewable portfolio without raising rates more than 15% over the next 10 years. Something that we're looking at, okay? I'm not going to make promises, but it's something that we're looking at, and we continue to work with Corey on saying, okay, is this doable and things like that. But those are our goals. We're less than 15% renewables, but we want to make sure that we're not making energy or making wind and selling it into the market, and it's not benefiting us. And then doubling the renewable energy by 2030 and setting the stage to go to that next level so we can continue to try to meet the climate action plan. Are there any questions for electric?
Thank you, Don. Questions?
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask how much of the new generation is due to new peak versus what we had as our prior peak? Like how long? Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess the best way to answer that is right now, today, we have 2 megawatts to spare. As of our load today, we have 2 megawatts to spare. So any growth beyond that, that new generation, let's assume that the units are 20 megawatts each, okay? We need roughly 35 to replace 7. So if we put in 2 20s, we're not gaining much. So we need about 3 of them. So the new generation we're proposing here, about 20 to 25 megawatts of future growth capacity. Is that?
Sure. Thank you.
Is the peak driving as our
Aging equipment driving it.
It's a little bit of both. So using the numbers, we need to replace a 35 megawatt generator just to remain whole. Everything else beyond that then would be for peak consumption.
You could drive people to off peak times. Would that help delay that or not?
Yeah, Steve brings up a good point. If we can delay that summer peak, if we can continue to invest more in energy efficiency, it doesn't eliminate the need, but it may delay it 1 or 2 or 3 years. But
Sure. Does the
It's-
advanced metering help with that piece? So that's why is that why we're being more aggressive
Yeah.
with the advanced metering time schedule?
it helps. So the advanced metering will allow us to do what's called time of use rates. With time of use rates, today it's voluntary. One of the things you'd really need to do in the summer to make it effective is 5 years from now, 10 years, maybe that becomes, I hate to use the word mandatory, but yes, because what it does is it shows the prices as they impact the system. And time of use rates, if we peak always in the 3 to 7 o'clock time period, that's going to be the most expensive time. Customers can continue to use the energy like they see fit, but that will hopefully drive customers to use it at different times. That would be a very beneficial.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Tim?
Could you go back to the Prairie View substation slide? It's maybe like the third or fourth slide. Can you fly back? And my question is, I just want to tease out the cost benefit analysis of this. So I originally we looked at Prairie View as perhaps a different project than what it's materializing. Alliant is taking on a much larger role in driving the outcome of that development. So when I think about that kind of investment on behalf of the taxpayers, I feel like I need to make sure that we're looking, there's a benefit to the city aside from the developmental purposes. So I find myself viewing this project differently. So here's the hypothetical. If there was not a Prairie View development, does the city benefit in terms of those substations, in terms of the benefit to the overall structure to warrant that investment?
Valid question. And in fact, I was just talking to our manager of engineering on this just yesterday. Prairie View doesn't exist. Today, what we have is we have a strong line to Boone Junction. We have a strong line down to Ankeny. The 69 kV line that you see there in blue is a weak line, but it still serves a purpose, okay? The other critical piece today is we have a generator that is nearly always on, whether it's 7 or 8 burning RDF. There's some benefit in that. So we basically have 3 sources of power plus the 69 kV, 4 sources of power. When we move away from waste to energy, in all likelihood, most of the time, unit 7, let's say it's not there, unit 8 may not be running because it's not always cost effective. And even these new units, maybe it's less expensive to buy from the market. So now you've just reduced the reliability down to 2 lines. One line gets taken out for maintenance, and you've got the city hanging on a long line from, let's say, Boone Junction or Ankeny, okay? So the first thing that, again, absent Prairie View, first thing Lyndon's going to come to me and say, oh, Don, we need a new source, all right? Where are there new sources? Marshalltown. So do we build a line to Marshalltown? You could build, that's probably the direction. Marshalltown's going to get a 345,000 volt line. So you'd start looking at building towards Marshalltown. Or we could build the line up to Fernald. That's one of the 2 gray lines. So we have this long distance. So with the substation, the absolute cheapest way to get another source into Ames by building this new line, it's all in Ames. I mean, we're literally going from Prairie View substation to us. There are challenges in terms of routing and stuff like that, but that is the low-cost solution to bring a new source into Ames.
So just if I could
That's the
summarize,
benefit.
yep, so that's really good. Let me make sure I understand it. So to summarize this, it creates greater security for our system. So if we had a derecho or some other unexplained or unanticipated outage, that creates greater reliability for our system. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
And so when you do the cost benefit analysis, aside from anything developmental wise, we would do this anyway. Am I saying it correctly?
We would need to start looking at a major transmission line investment.
At
Okay.
a much higher
So we
cost.
don't serve that area out there yet.
Right.
An industrial area is not served by us.
Correct.
At a much higher cost though, because you'd be running a line to Marshalltown or Fresnel versus.
Transmission revenue.
Yep. So this was very helpful. Secondly, in your prior presentation, you talked about the relationship between Ames and the regional grid, and that there are significant capital improvements that are being planned, and we're going to be the taxpayers, or I should say the ratepayers. Thank you. I'll get this eventually. Are contributing to that. I apologize. Is that something that's in the CIP budget or in your general budget? Our contribution to that?
Okay, complex question. So I want to back up and first address what Steve Shanker brought up, because this is worth it. If or whenever we build this line, you saw the 4 million and the 5 million. One of the things to keep in mind is the transmission system is like a spider web. And so when we make those investments, and this kind of gets to your second question, when we make those investments, we share that with all of the other utilities, and there are payments to use these wires. So our investments actually through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, have a guaranteed rate of return of 10%. So by us investing $9 million, there's going to be a cash flow stream or an investment credit of $900,000 coming back to the city. So we're actually getting, I don't say reimbursed, but we're getting paid by others to use that thing. Moving on to your second question, and so we'll have these pieces in our capital improvement plan with council's approval. If Mid-American or another party invests $100 million in a major line going to Marshalltown, 345 kV line, we have two choices, and we're not addressing that in our budget. People are going to pay for that. The cost of those lines are going to get socialized amongst everybody that uses it. So our transmission rates to use that will go up. We don't have to invest in it. It's paid for by the use. It's like a highway toll, if you will. Some of the things that we could be looking at, we think we've got a pretty big bite in our capital plan right now for us to say we want to invest additional money in other transmission resources. We're not at a point yet where we even want to suggest that to council. Is that what you're kind of asking?
No, I apologize, and I could have done some more homework on this. So in the prior presentation, you indicated that there are substantial upgrades that are needed in the national grid, but as well within our regional grid, and those participating producers would be responsible for some level of contribution to the upgrades of that grid. My question is, I don't see that in the CIP budget. It seems like that would be where I would see it, but I don't. So could you clarify that for me?
Yes. So, and again, those plans are 10, 15, 20 years out. Where you would see those costs would be in our transmission cost to MISO. So those would be in the O&M budget, so we have a line item that says, how much are we paying to use the grid? And we have money in the budget today, roughly $1 million.
So I think that answers it. So those costs are baked into other fees. I mean, they're sort of nested in there. Am I saying that correctly? So we're not going to see a separate line item for grid improvements.
No.
It's baked into it,
Yeah.
into our fees.
Yeah, we will start seeing 10 plus years, the transmission costs going up. So right now, for us to use it's like $3 a megawatt hour. That may go to 5, that may go to 7.
Okay,
as those other, if that,
That answers my question. Thank you. That's very helpful. And final question. Like our prior presentation on the fire, I'm a little paranoid right now about the security of our integrity and security of our systems. So we've talked about this in prior years. So can you just assure us that as we think about the improvements that we're making, you're doing this with a conscientiousness to secure the integrity of our system from outside hacking and interference?
so cybersecurity is by far a huge topic all across the spectrum, water, electric,
Right.
everybody. I can't say we are not vulnerable to that like anybody else. The one thing I will emphasize is we have a fiber system within electric. We don't even let the city use it. Ours is so tied down and so closed. It is only for the use of generator and system control. We have completely separate systems from the rest of the fiber that runs to the city. So that's how we attempt to maintain a more grid resilient or a hacking cyber resilient system that allows us to do that. We have, I don't know, you want to?
And I wouldn't understand any of the technical side, and I wouldn't want to go too much detail anyway.
Yeah.
But I find myself quite paranoid about this. Is the more vulnerabilities that we sense, I feel the need to make sure that our departments are following best practices to protect us. So I just want to make sure that's part of the conversation.
I was just going to add, we also work a lot with NERC, which is the National Electric Regulatory Commission, and they're constantly working to communicate with us to make sure that we're aware of system, like national wide things that are happening, and then looking at our vulnerabilities if we have similar issues or vulnerabilities. And then there's compliance that we have to respond to them to make sure that we are up to speed on those requirements and things to make sure that we are, from a security perspective, that we're protected.
Tim, Corey in his operation is responsible for cybersecurity. So when he gives the operational budget, his presentation, he'll speak to that, what his team is doing in IT.
I appreciate that. Yep. Thank you for those answers.
Don, on the coal yard cleanup, did a consultant give us that number of 250,000 to clear that site?
Yeah, there's two numbers in there. There's $1 million, and then there's 250,000. Did we get a quote in putting those together? There's two different things that need to be done. There's all of the equipment that needs to be removed that currently is still there, and then there's the cleanup of any remaining coal that may exist.
Yeah, we haven't brought on an engineer or a consultant to help us with this project quite yet. Actually, tomorrow they have a meeting to start talking further into it, one of our engineers.
Okay. And then the other thing is that we're looking at potentially, hopefully, some significant growth on the north side of town, residential, which is probably a lighter load for you guys. But we also talked about hopefully the growth of EV charging stations, either in the home as well as maybe commercially. And we discussed over prior years about, is our grid system, our internal distribution system, serving our residences and our other commercial, is that in need of bolstering because of anticipated increases, or are you hoping that the off-peak use and this metering system would kind of help level that out? I'm just trying to think in terms of, I didn't see anything in your distribution for, I call it localized, that is within the city limits of Ames, to try and help, anticipating that we may have more electrical demand. So maybe, I'm sure you've already thought about it. I was just kind of curious what your thinking is. And why nothing's included, or that maybe is in your operation and maintenance. You're just planning on always upgrading that, and it's not in CIP.
Yeah, we typically at the distribution level like to have redundancy. So in other words, one line will come this way, one line will come that way, and we'll have an open switch so that we can back it up that way. Future load is an interesting thing because, yep, EVs are going to add new loads to those systems. The conversion from natural gas to beneficial electrification will add to that. Conversely, we hopefully, when we bring you value of solar, we're going to start seeing more residential customers putting solar on, which kind of does the opposite. And so as our engineering group talks about it, it's like, are loads going to increase during peak? Are they going to decrease because of solar and that type of stuff? The time of use rates, we're also hoping that that will do a lot of not on peak, off peak. It's interesting. So we're very much a summer peaking utility. In fact, our summer peak's 138. We just hit a new winter peak, just hit 100 last night about this time. To show you that 138 versus 100, we're sitting there with about 50% more generating capability in the winter than we do in the summer. So we have a tremendous amount of spare capacity for winter load growth and things like that due to heating. But the point I was going to make is air conditioners are very efficient. Heat pumps are even more efficient. So if we encourage somebody or somebody puts in a heat pump that'll lower their summer demand, and at the same time it raises their winter demand, but not by much. So you're offsetting natural gas, but you're also lowering the cooling in the summer. So you're raising the heating and lowering the cooling, and we still have it doesn't stress the distribution system. It's those things where if Curtis bought 2 Ford Lightnings and wanted them both plugged in at the same time together with his kids taking baths, we'd have to look at upsizing his transformer or things like that. But it's something we're looking at. Long story short, we're trying to blend in new loads together with what is solar going to do in the future.
That is one thing also that the AMI will help us study much better, and just understanding the behaviors and how we can. But what time and resources do we spend on those kinds of behaviors to help out?
So I'm hearing is there's a lot of moving parts. It's being studied and looked at, but right now there's nothing anticipated for a CIP to go ahead and do for the next 10 years, like you're doing the LED light fixtures, on the poles, not needing extra revenue or extra investments in our local neighborhood grid systems, essentially, correct?
That's correct.
Great. Any other questions?
So the mayor just mentioned the growth areas. I was under the impression that not all of our growth areas were Ames electric services, right? So how much of the anticipated growth area is actually ours?
Ours meaning City
The
of Ames
cities,
Electric.
yeah,
I'd have to say 10%,
that's what I thought.
15%. So most of it's in Alliance, Consumers, and Midlands. I believe what the mayor, though, was looking at with an existing home, moving to an air source heat pump or moving to electric vehicles, the infrastructure may be 20 years old. If the 4 homes served off of a common transformer each did that, how would that impact the transformer and then the distribution feeder?
Yeah, actually, Gloria's right, and you're right. The question was both. One was expanding to the north, and to your
Yeah.
point, some of it may not be into our electric territory. But I also had a question in terms of upgrades that are done in existing homes and how that would impact our system. So,
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Curtis. Appreciate it. We'll move on to water production treatment with John and Perul.
Jeff, Chris?
Good evening, respected council members, city managers, and members of the public. I am Parul Barinwal, Assistant Director of Water and Pollution Control Department, and I am here to present before you 2025-2030 Capital Improvement Plan for the Water and Pollution Control Department. Before we dive into the details, I would like to introduce some key members of our team who have been integral to our department's effort. Daria Del Parek is here, our environmental engineer. Dustin Albrecht, our environmental specialist, and Maureen Morini, our laboratory supervisor. The capital improvement, second. The capital improvement plan includes two major, sorry. The main goal of the water treatment plant is to improve the resilience, and this includes preparing for natural disasters, equipment failures, as well as handling the increased demand, regular maintenance, and overall better performance. So the capital improvement plan will include the two major groups, water production treatment and the water pollution control. The total projected investment for these initiatives for over the next 5 years is $64,328,000. One of the key projects in our capital improvement plan is the renovation of the technical service complex building. And this renovation aims to address the critical issues in the building, such as the failure of the HVAC system, damage to the ceiling tiles, necessary lighting upgrades, as well as the general building refresh, including the improvements to the flooring and the wall coverings. And this project will be funded by the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Next, please. The next project the next project is water plant facility improvement, and it focuses on the ongoing repairs, upgrades to the essential equipments in the water treatment plant, as well as the remote facilities in our plant, such as like wells or booster pumps and elevated tanks. And one of the key upgrade in this project is adding the third slaker system, which mixes the quick lime with the water, and it produces the slurry which is used for the water treatment. So that would enhance the water capacity treatment process. And also we are planning to upsize our high service pump station, which would be with the increasing demand. And lastly, which is the key component, is upgrading the SCADA system. So these system monitor and control the plant operations, and upgrading them will enhance our system security and also the reliability, overall increasing the efficient operation of water treatment plant. The Wellfield standby project, it involves providing the standby electrical power to some of the wells which are located in the Hunziker Youth Sports Complex area. And this is required by Iowa's water supply design standards for having the redundant electrical power. So by giving the emergency power backups to these important wells, the city can continue providing water even when there is a power failure during emergency, such as a storm or other events. And the phase 1 for this study has already been completed, which involves the archaeological study and the design phase. We are currently waiting for approval from the FEMA for the phase 2 construction. The physical and cyber security improvement project, it involves the installation of the security fencing, which will be implemented to secure the pump station and elevated tank in order to ensure that there should be no unauthorized access to these facility. And as part of our compliance effort, we are currently developing the risk assessment and emergency response plan to the Environmental Protection Agency, which is due by 31st December 2025. So in line to those compliance efforts, we will also create the risk assessment with these security fencing that might drive up new projects in the upcoming year, because it will evaluate the entire project. And it is also essential to modernize our SS control system update. So that will also ensure that only authorized personnel can enter the sensitive areas, and it will prevent the water facility from cyber attacks. Thank you. The SAM pump station improvement project, it involves the installation of 2 variable frequency drives for the fiscal year 25-26, and this will reduce the sudden pressure changes in the pump station, which will help to prevent the water main breaks and lower the maintenance cost for the project. Prairie View Industrial Center elevated project, it involves the construction of 1 million gallon elevated tank, and this tank would be necessary to maintain the pressure as well as to handle the increasing water demand, as well as to provide the firefighting capacity in that area. This project has been delayed by 1 year so that to allow more time before the construction begins. However, the schedule is kind of flexible, and it can be adjusted depending on the development of the Prairie View Industrial Center. The next project is the wellhead rehabilitation, which involves the periodic rehabilitation of above ground components of all the 22 wells in city of Ames, including the 2 new wells which are under construction. So the main component of this project is like we are segregating the low and high voltage components, and this will help to ensure the safe operations and improve the safety, and also it will reduce the risk of like electrical hazards to our maintenance workers. Additionally, we are installing the variable frequency drive on the well 22 so that we can have more control on the water flow which is coming to our water treatment plant, like in future whenever there will be the growth in demand for the water. The Lime Lagoon project, so this facility is designed to store and dewater the residuals which are generated during the lime softening process. The residuals which are obtained, they are then dewatered, and they are then applied to the agricultural farm as an agricultural liming agent, which is kind of a sustainable practices which we are doing by repurposing the waste materials. So to enhance the operational efficiency, we are making improvement in this dewatering process, which will reduce the sludge disposal cost by minimizing the wet ton hauling expenses. And in fiscal year 27-28, this project aims to replace the existing decant pump, or we are planning to tie the 2 lift stations together. The major aim is to eliminate the pump so that it will reduce the energy consumption and also the maintenance needs or maintenance expenses for the project. New pumps and drive project involves the addition of 2 new high service pumps at the water treatment plant with the variable frequency drives, and this is designed again to support future distribution system upgrades, and VFD will also help in enabling the pump speed adjustment and match the growing water demand. The Mortensen and County Line elevated tower, it was constructed in 2003 with an expected life of coating system of 25 years. And the repainting project is planned for fiscal year 28-29, which will involve the sandblasting, priming, and also the painting of this, repainting of this tank to make sure it for its longer life durability and performance. But the project timeline will be adjusted accordingly. We will do inspection and we will determine if the repainting would be considered or it can be deferred later in the future. The Ada Hedden water quality study, it involves the periodic review of the health of the lakes and wetlands to ensure their ecological integrity and suitability for the recreational use. So as the part of the established 5-year monitoring plan, the water quality assessments are conducted every 5 years. And in this water quality assessment, we evaluate all the key parameters for the water quality such as dissolved oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, Lg, turbidity, and bacteria levels. And the result help us to determine the health of the lake, and also all the land activities, which is effectiveness of land use practices in preserving the water quality. So the next water quality monitoring event for Ada Headon is scheduled for fiscal year 29-30, following the most recent one assessment, which was conducted in 23-24. Coming to the capital improvement plan for the water pollution control facility. The first one is the nutrient reduction modification project. This is a $53 million project which aims to enhance and upgrade the existing facility, which will treat the wastewater from Ames, and it will discharge into the South Skunk River. The phase one, the phase one includes the construction of half of the erosion basin capacity, bar screens, grit removal, and the relocation of the administration building. And these upgrades will increase the plant capacity from 12.1 million gallon per day to 14.6 mgd, which will meet the growing needs of the community while also fulfilling the discharge permit which is set by the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. And the nutrient reduction modification phase one project, it focuses on converting the facility to the biological nutrient removal to meet the requirements for large municipal and industrial wastewater facilities. The phase two for this project, it focuses on completing the remaining aeration capacity and sludge thickening facility, which the design will begin in the fiscal year 2035 to 36. Ensuring the strategic and phased implementation of these critical upgrades. The current update I want to give to the council member for this project is that a significant amount of wall panels has been successfully installed across the admin building as well as the new sludge buildings, and the elevated slab work is also in the progress for the sludge pumping area. The cogeneration system maintenance project, it supports the city's climate action plan by converting the food waste to the methane for electricity generation. In fiscal year 25-26, we plan for design phase for the fog receiving station, and in 26-27 there would be the construction phase for the new fog receiving station. The improvements will be upgraded pumping facilities of efficient waste handling, and the enhanced ability will also be required to accept the diverted food waste from the resource recovery plant. In 29-30 fiscal year, there would be overhauling of methane generator 3, which plays a very critical role in converting the methane into electricity for on-site power generation. And like over time, wear and tear reduces the efficiency of the methane generator. So the overhauling will ensure that generator is operating efficiently.
So just for people who are watching, I don't mean to interrupt you, but could you explain what fog is? Because there are people who don't know what fog is.
So it's oil and grease, which is coming, fats, oil and grease, which is coming from the food waste.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know what that is, but there are people who are watching this
Sure.
have no idea when it says constructing a new fog receiving station.
Sure.
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, I
So-
should have mentioned the full
Yeah,
form
yeah.
there.
No, that's
Sorry.
great. Oh, cool. Thanks.
The watershed based nutrient reduction project. So the construction cost for the phase one for the nutrient reduction project were higher than anticipated, and to reduce the sewer rate impacts, the council members have directed us to cut the watershed funding from $200,000 to $100,000, and we reflected so in the balance. We updated the budget accordingly. So also the water pollution control facilities conversion to nutrient removal technology is a priority, and to support this, the $100,000 annually from the sewer fund is allocated for the urban and rural watershed development. The key projects in this area are wetland construction, land retirement, and edge of field projects, which involve innovative methods such as saturated buffers and bioreactors. And all these projects will provide a lot of benefits such as the flood and drought risk reduction, improved recreational activities, as well as will help to have the good wildlife habitat. WPC facility improvement addresses the ongoing repairs, maintenance, replacements, and upgrades of the equipment at the water pollution control facility. And these repairs or maintenance, these are not impacted by the nutrient reduction project. So the focus is on maintaining and upgrading the system for the water pollution facility, making sure that our facility operates efficiently and reliably, along with the other upgrades which are going on. And this involves, like in 25-26, the upgrade of the electric service and the controls for the remote storage building and the grain bins, and also replacing the atomic spectrophotometer, which is used for detecting the heavy metals in the water. And in 27-28, we are performing maintenance on buried valves and valve operators, which are not included in the nutrient reduction project. And lastly, in fiscal year 28-29, the project involves conducting maintenance on like valves, spitter boxes, and actuators to ensure that they are functioning properly. The lift station upgrades and improvement. This project focuses on improving the efficiency, reliability, and cost effectiveness of wastewater lift stations through targeted upgrades. So in 25-26, all 5 wastewater lift stations will be connected through the cellular connection. And so all the key data which involves like wet well levels, alarm status, or pumping run times, they will be transmitted every 15 minutes, which will give the real time monitoring for our operators, and it will definitely reduce the overtime by enabling operators to access the urgency of these issues remotely. And in 26-27, we are planning to replace the pumps and the controls at the free drive station. uh, mm, where these updates will also improve the station's performance and reliability. And in fiscal year 28-29, the Northwood lift station will be removed and it will be replaced with a gravity sewer. So the Northwood lift station, it serves a small area with no anticipated future development. So this replacement will make it a cost effective and sustainable solution. So overall, these entire upgrades are modernizing the infrastructure and reducing our operational cost. The last slide, the clarifier maintenance project, it involves the repainting of the steel structures of the 3 clarifiers, which are like primary clarifier, intermediate clarifiers, and the final clarifier. And it will be done to protect the steel from exposure to harsh conditions, which are in the submerged areas, and also between the air and water area, which are there at the interface of air and water. And the repainting will prevent the corrosion and extend the lifespan of the equipment. And to ensure the feasibility, as well as ensure that there should be no interruption in our facility operations, we divided this work between 2 years. So in 26-27, we will be repainting the portion of the clarifier, and in 27-28, we will be completing the remaining clarifiers. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Parul. Questions?
I'm not sure if it's capital, but I've been reading a lot about new concerns about PFAS in sludge used, in municipal sludge that's put on land as fertilizer, where, for a long time, the EPA recommended you use it in that way, and now they're finding really high concentrations of PFAS. We still use our sludge in that way as fertilizer. So I guess my questions are we starting to hear concern about that? Is that something that we're looking into testing for? They don't require it yet, but And then what impacts would that have to the budget if we couldn't use our sludge in that way? Or would that affect our equipment needs or anything like that?
Yes. So I sat in an EPA webcast just last week on this. EPA released a new risk assessment is what it's all based on. It's not a regulatory standard, and EPA took great care during that presentation to say this is not looking at exposures to the general public, and they are not at this time anticipating regulating it. This is just a risk assessment. One of the things they noted, though, is that nationally, more than half of all the biosolids are disposed of through land application. And the other significant route is incineration. In replacing land application with incineration is not, this is my editorial now, that's not the best environmental swap that we can make. I think that we would be replacing a lower risk with something that could pose a much greater risk. So that's the answer right now.
Sure.
And we have had our samples, our sludge tested a couple of times as to how that compared to the risk assessment. The report didn't give a clear translation because they're looking at human exposure dosage, and so it's so many milligrams per kilograms of body weight, and there wasn't a clear walkthrough to what that would translate through to sludge concentrations.
Interesting. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Other questions?
Can I take you to the standby power question? So you, the report mentions the event of a prolonged power outage. During the derecho, we had some neighborhoods that were without power for 11 days. That was the maximum. What's the length of time that we could ensure our residents that they would have access to water with this standby power?
So right now, the treatment plant and the high service pumping has got fairly reliable emergency pumping capabilities. Where we're at risk is in the source water. It doesn't do any good to have a power plant or a water plant that's powered if you can't bring water to it. And so that's why we have multiple projects going right now to extend power. The new North River Valley Wellfield project that's under construction, an element of that will feed those new wells from the emergency generator that's at the water plant. And then the project that this one's talking about specifically would install a new standby generator just north of the dog park that would feed down into the Hunziker Youth Sports Complex and power 4 wells down there. So once those 2 projects are done, hopefully within a year, that'll give us 7 relatively high capacity wells that are backed up under emergency power.
And I love everything about this. The city has learned a lot from the derecho, and it seems like so many departments have responded with thoughtful improvements in the system. But is it possible, and maybe it's not, if it's okay if it's not, but can you quantify how many days the city could go if we had a power outage where we could have water?
Yeah, so those 7 wells would be capable of meeting our average day demand. So in the summer, if there was something that happened, we would have to immediately say outdoor lawn watering is prohibited. That type of a measure would have to come in place. It could go indefinitely, presuming that we can get fuel to the generators to refuel them. They're going to have about a 48-hour, give or take, 48-hour ability to store that fuel. And a part of that is the cost to put that storage in, and then the challenge to keep that fuel good, because for air quality reasons, we're not allowed to run the emergency generators unless it's an emergency. And so we've got to have an ability to turn that fuel over regularly too.
Okay, this is really fascinating.
We couldn't put like a 10-day supply of fuel out there and hope that we could keep that fuel good for a long time.
But I think it's encouraging to people that there's a path forward that we could bring in additional fuel to supply those generators to keep the water moving. Okay, thank you for that. And-
Wait, so I heard you say we cannot run a generator to test it. Most generators are run either weekly or every other week to make sure they operate. So if something goes wrong, they can go ahead and take care of that. So this generator will sit until it's needed for an emergency use. We can't run it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the air quality permits associated with these specifically say that the units cannot be used for electrical peak shaving. They're only there for emergency operation. So outside of an emergency, there's a limit, a number of hours, and I can't remember what it is, but there's only so many hours per year that we can run them for testing purposes.
So okay. You just kind of, I'm in shock because the point is that you just can't have something not operating routinely and having
Yeah.
a feedback loop to know that it is working properly. I mean, hospitals, I mean, here at the city hall, I think it is run routinely to make sure it operates.
Yeah,
So you're governed by a different,
no,
air-
it's probably the same rules. The permit, I think it allows us for up to 100 hours per year outside of an emergency.
okay. So you could run an hour a week on a test run for sake of discussion.
Exactly.
I misunderstood. I thought you said, I thought I heard you say that you can only use it in an emergency case. That, I said, what happens, it would not kick on when you needed it to kick on. That was also. So I love Tim's question. I had the exact same question. As I know one of the concerns that you had in the derecho, loss of power, was the water slowly going down in the water tanks.
Mhm.
You're comfortable with the systems that when they're installed, we'll be able to, by cutting out outside watering and being a little bit careful, we'll avoid that from happening in the future. Is that correct?
Yes, and as future well fields are developed, standby power will just be a regular.
I did
component
read
to
that too, that you're going to integrate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great,
Go ahead.
great
Go
answer.
ahead.
Thank you.
Yep.
Small question. Page 69 is the Ada Hayden water quality study. And I love this. We have to protect this. My question is, why is this in the CIP? This has nothing to do with like a big infrastructure project. Why is this here?
I think it was put there first for, make sure you saw it, the public saw it. It could be placed, quite frankly, it could be placed into the operating budget if you wanted to. It was so important to people. And sometimes studies are a prelude to big capital improvements. So I think it was more for publicity. Remember, there were people who really pushed us to do that.
Oh, and the council was very supportive of this.
It doesn't fit the definition, study by itself. We put transportation studies in there too. Sometimes, some of Damien's projects are in there too, studies, I think, because they're a precursor of maybe beginnings of capital improvements, but we could slide that into his administrative budget, I'm sure.
It just seems like it fits better within that other structure. Final point. I will be so glad when we'll stop talking about the nutrient reduction efforts. My therapist says this will be good for me to be done with this. But there's a story here that I think the community needs to hear that is really that we need to highlight here just for a minute, that although the nutrient reduction effort is the biggest boondoggle I have ever personally seen, you have found a way to dovetail that project with other meaningful improvements for the community. And could you just sort of, and you've been through this with us before, but just briefly just sort of summarize how we've taken this otherwise boondoggle project and layered on top of it improvements that are really valuable for the community. Could you just take a second and talk about that? That's really important.
Yeah, first the project for the construction project itself, as a part of these modifications, we are adding about 2.5 million gallons per day of capacity to the plant. So that's available for future growth. But I think you're referring to the watershed-based projects. Is that what you're?
I mean, everything about this, we've taken a bad project and made it a good project because of I think the creativity and thoughtfulness you brought to bear, I just wanted to tease that out.
Yeah, yeah. As a part of the equipment upgrades that are happening in the
Correct.
building, a lot of it is equipment that was a 35-year-old facility. It was ready to be replaced anyway.
Filters.
Yeah. So like the new bar screens that are going in, we were going to be buying new bar screens anyway. As a part of this project, we're picking a different style, picking different screen mesh sizes. But it was an expense that we were already going to have. By splitting this project into 2 phases, it's allowing us to match the timing of infrastructure replacement with what the remaining useful life is. And so there's things that were at the end of their useful life that we're addressing right now. Other structures in the plant that still have remaining life, those are going to be a part of that second phase that's going to lag by about 12 years.
I just think it's terrific. And I have to wonder that there are many communities around Iowa who are having to comply with these requirements, and they're just doing this as a standalone project, and their citizens are paying gajillions of dollars for something that has no effect on the Gulf. We're doing it in a way that is a benefit to our community. And again, thank you for the work that you did to make this project a much better one for the community. I wanted to highlight that. It's really noteworthy.
And I would like to highlight for you on the watershed-based projects. Been a lot of years working with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. We're able to bank the nutrient reduction credit that we get as a form of protection against any future tightening of the nutrient regulations. And Dustin is the one who's managing all of these projects for us and just doing a tremendous job. Within the last few months, the Iowa DNR has started to approve those nutrient bank credits. So we are now starting to see that return come back and get quantified for us with the Iowa DNR.
Yeah. We have, this is just a project. I don't know if the Tribune would ever run a story on just this topic, but just how well served we have been because of this. So anyway, thanks for your work on that.
John, I want to go back to the Ada Hayden water quality study. We recently made some changes to our conservation overlay for those developments around Ada Hayden. And I'm wondering if you think we're okay with a 6-year interval on this, or do we need to move it up, or do we need to move it back because we aren't going to be able to assess the impact of those changes that we're making?
For right now, I think that we're probably on about the right interval. You can reach a point where you've got so much data that it just starts to become noise. I think looking at it at regular intervals is helpful. The changes that were made in the management that's likely to occur as development happens up there, my opinion, I don't know that it's going to have a negative impact. I think it's going to be neutral for the impact on the lakes.
Other questions? This is small, but you have a water plant HVAC control upgrade at 90 grand, and this is for our water plant?
Which project were you?
Page 60. It's this year. It's in the book. I was just curious, for facility, it's only, less than 10 years old. I was just curious, could you explain why there's $90,000 for HVAC controls already for an upgrade, for a building which is really fairly new, in my opinion. But
yeah, the control system that went in was, now I'm trying to remember. It's a Windows 10 based system, and we can't repair pieces of the HVAC system because of the fact that it can't communicate now on a Windows 10. So the whole control system needs to be upgraded.
Okay.
So we are at about 8 years. And so some of the technology things, unfortunately, that's kind of the life cycle now on some of the computerized equipment.
Is there any way to, I was just thinking that it's a horrendous amount of money for, we paid $9,000 a year for a temperature control system. And it just seems that there should be some kind of way to have a systems in place that would be easily upgradable without spending that kind of money, but I'll leave it at that. Page 71, under this is the phase 2 of the project. It says design will start in FY 2035-36. And then it shows the construction estimate in 2035, first half bid date. I was just kind of wondering how you can reconcile those. If design's just going to start in 35-36, you probably wouldn't be starting construction until 36-37 or 37-38.
Yeah, I would expect that design would probably be about a 6-month effort at this point. There shouldn't be a lot of preliminary design work.
As compared to what we went through for the first phase, is what
Right.
you're saying?
Yeah.
So you're anticipating that in 2035, first half of the year? What's the 2035 estimate, first half bid date?
That was just Strand's estimate. That was the year that they happened to pick that they carried that price forward to.
Oh, I see. Okay. Then I was just curious why the fog receiving station wasn't in this current project, because it's being done right in the tail of this project being done, right? Because you said that the our wastewater treatment plant should be done sometime next year. Is that right?
Right.
I'm just curious, was there a reason why it wasn't integrated into this project, or?
The simple answer is there's a limit to the amount of chaos happening in the plant at one time that we were willing to take on.
Good enough for me. All right. And then last question. On page 76, on your painting of the clarifiers, for some reason I thought that the clarifiers were going away, but actually the clarifiers are going to stay there even after phase 2. Is that correct?
Yes, they will stay.
I see. Okay. I just didn't know about the maintenance on those, if they're going to go away in, 5 or 6 years, but those will always be in place where you got the clarifier ponds in. Okay.
Yep, based on our current concept, they will remain.
And this is not a budget question, but I know we've talked about this for many years. The, like Tim said, the amount of money we're spending on the plant for minimal reduction in our nitrates, going into the Gulf. Do you think that long-term that our edge of field work will actually have more benefit than the plant improvements? I know we have to do the plant improvements because it's 35 years old and an easier place. So I get that, but I'm just curious. It seems in your previous conversations years ago that shows great promise. Is that still true?
I think it is. I don't know that the level of funding that we're putting into it is going to do it. The hope, though, is that it's spurring other projects to happen in the watershed as well. That's really what we wanted this to be, is sort of a catalyst that encouraged other things to happen in the watershed. And you see on that page the amount of outside funding that we're able to bring in. We're putting in about $500,000 over the next 5 years, but we're getting 4 times that back in the amount of work that's happening in the watershed.
Well, I just want you to know, I brag up what we're doing and what the staff is doing. I'm in the Central Iowa Mayor's Group, and they're talking about doing these little things. I'm just telling them what they're doing. And I think that they're actually thinking about how can they work upstream as well too. So it's just amazing how we're just on the cutting edge or really trying to take the lead on doing these things. And I'm just proud and the work that you guys are doing. You're forward thinking and really trying to make a difference. And I think that others are realizing we just can't do it all with treatment. It's got to be pre-treatment, upstream as well too. So I hope it happens. It's going to be a great asset to not only our state, but also to the Gulf of Mexico. All right. Thank you all for coming. we'll move on to water distribution.
Good job, bro.
So is this known as the swan song, or what is this known as tonight? John?
It's getting close.
I was teasing John before we came in here. I says, what are you doing here? You only got a week and a half to go. So, but anyway, for those who may be watching it,
Said I could just smell the free pizza from down the hallway.
it's just, John, we just want to thank you for all you've done. We wish you well as you wrap up your career, and I appreciate you staying on to get through the budget process, and I know you're leaving it in great hands, but wish you all the best. You'll be missed, but
Thank you.
you served the city of Ames well, and it's been an honor serving on council and having you at the helm, and I'm sure there'll be someone that will step in your shoes, do a great job. But anyway, on
Yep,
behalf
for sure.
of
Yep, thank you very
council,
much.
thank you so much. And it's a little bittersweet to have you come in and make it. And then but the thing is, you can make mistakes, and you're not going to be here to take the responsibility for it. So
That's right.
You'll blame somebody else, right?
Best of both worlds. Well, thank you. I appreciate
Go
it.
ahead,
It's very kind. Thank you. So I'd like to start out by thanking the division heads that have put a lot of effort into creating this plan that we'll go through tonight. McKinley Ritter in admin, she put a lot of work into creating the slide base here. And Damian Pregitzer with traffic. And in their first time leading through the CIP process with Mindy Bringleson in engineering, and Mark Peebler, resource recovery. And beside me, we have Justin Clausen, operations manager, and Justin will be the interim public works director beginning at the end of the month. So Justin put a
Justin.
lot of extra work into this plan, and with his upcoming tenure as the interim director, Justin will lead us through the slides tonight.
All right, great.
John didn't want to finish it. I tried to convince him to do that.
What's that?
John didn't want to finish and do the presentation tonight.
Well, you just want to see a grown man cry, right? Just
He delegated well.
yeah, well, Justin, we're pleased that I know you'll do a great job as interim, and so we'll look forward to the presentation. Please
Thank
take it
you.
away.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As we usually do, we'll start tonight with our short little recap video. We can use the mouse left-handed. It's not playing on there. Hold on a second.
Just so you know, he had the same problem last year, so he's consistent, right, John?
That's right.
We're going to shut this teacher down quick.
I think it's the second screen.
There's a second screen.
Yeah, it's the second screen. Well, no, on the computer, it's an extension. There you go.
Whoa, here it is.
We've got it now. Mouse over there.
There it is.
There it is. A little bit of delay.
It's a little happy dance. Like it.
I'll try to bring as much energy as the contractor's employee there. I think you realize he got caught on film. So we'll continue tonight with the utility program. As you can see on the screen, we have a map of the 5-year utility locations in this year's CIP. Specifically, we'll start with water distribution on page 78. This program targets areas that have aging water infrastructure and also areas where we find user input from water main breaks or rusty water locations as well. We really try to coordinate these with our street reconstruction projects as well, so we can only inconvenience citizens one time when we're doing work, and we're really cognizant of that, try to make sure we coordinate all that work together. Continuing in utilities, we've got the sanitary sewer infrastructure. This targets our sanitary collection system with reconstruction and rehabilitation of our sanitary sewer mains. Much of that is to keep the clean water out of the sanitary sewer mains, so we don't have to send it to the plant and increase their capacity unnecessarily and treat that water. It's expensive to do that, and it's not necessary if we can keep it out of the system that way. Continuing in the utilities, we have our stormwater utility. There's lots of initiatives in the stormwater here, from bank stabilization to water quality improvements and even minor flooding impacts that we try to take care of. One project I really want to bring to council attention here is our stormwater erosion control program. This happens with a lot of impact from citizens when they see either erosion that's affecting their property, or if we have it on public property as well. We're trying to keep those streams in their banks and limit that erosion. So Canterbury Court and Mortensen Parkway are two locations that we have selected for 25-26. Continuing along in utilities, we have resource recovery. So you'll notice on page 91, which is our resource recovery system improvements, which is the current system we have in place right now. Towards the end of that, we have a reduction in what the CIP has there. And what's going on with that is we've reduced our preventative maintenance in the current system, knowing that that system is going to be retired here shortly. And that will lead into the new resource recovery and recycling campus, which is on page 90. On your screen, we have a proposed layout of what this may look like. It's going to be obviously site specific, depending on where we land for a site for the resource recovery and recycling campus. But some of the things to keep in mind is we're separating commercial haulers and residential customers in the system. It obviously helps with safety and helps with the organization of the operation, but we still want to continue things like household hazardous waste collection, recycling, organic composting, and even picking up things such as yard waste as well. So council is going to see a lot more about this in the coming weeks and months. So as we get into that, it'll become more, we'll come back to you with more information. So that kind of wraps up the utilities portion. And now we get into the transportation portion of the CIP. And the map in front of you has the locations of, yeah, go ahead.
Let's do this. Let's stay with, see if there are any questions on this category, and then we'll go to transportation.
Sounds great.
You guys cover a lot of ground. Any questions on the water, sanitary sewer, stormwater, or resource recovery?
I mean, maybe, and I don't want to belabor this, but over the years, we've been able to see some pretty significant improvements in our stormwater system in Ames. For a city that's very prone to flooding, we haven't had anything, thankfully, in a while. Is there a way to assign, like some of Damien talks about the roads that are given a grade, is there a way to quantify just the improvement that we have seen in Ames in terms of our stormwater management?
I'm not familiar with a a metric that we could use necessarily. What I think we look at internally is specifically when we have issues and locations that we know there are problems and we get them repaired, do we have new places pop up because we, for lack of a better term, you plug the hole here and something will show up elsewhere. So I don't know of a metric that I can do that. I think I would concur with your thought there that we've made some pretty dramatic improvements. And really it's either the large events that we aren't designed for anyways, whether it's a flash flood event or whether it's a large aerial flood event that really affect us. So that's probably what we look at internally.
Yeah, and it just seemed like we've made some really great improvements that doesn't get a lot of airtime until it really matters when we have a major flood event. But I'm very excited about the things we've done to increase the safety for the community. That's all I had on that.
Great.
Can you, I think Vanessa was helping pay for some lead service, water service lines. I think it's over here to just the west of New Aquatic Center.
Yeah, North Russell.
Is there any update on where we stand with, or is that all, it's up to the residents to take care of it? We're just using the funds in that area because it qualified for the income level?
Yeah, so that specific project there in North Russell is one because of the LMI area that fits with Vanessa's funding. We looked at that with infrastructure improvements there. We have, I believe, around 250 lead services that remain in the system, and I think we're going to be bringing some ideas back to council of ways that we can finance some of that. Obviously, with our water system improvement programs, if we have those areas that we're going into, those areas are typically older water mains regardless. So it kind of works hand in hand. But to do it at the rate that we're doing, we're going to be behind. So we're looking at ways, how can we help make that happen on a quicker basis?
Okay. And Rob and I were just down at State Capitol for a event and happened to have a conversation with the senator. I won't go into details, but he asked if we have composting. And so long term, will we be doing citywide composting, and would that composting be something that people could get to use for soil amendment for preparation for grass or for sodding? Is that part of the plan or thinking, or is that way too far out?
It might be a little far, but I think that the thought process is correct. We want to start some of that stuff with the new resource recovery and recycling campus. I don't know that we've settled on how we would handle that material and if it would be made for resale or reuse in the public. That's certainly something that we would come back to council with, looking for some direction. We think that'd be a good use of the material, and just trying to figure out how that works with the operations as we get more into the details on that.
And I was encouraged when I was reading through the report over the weekend. Just looks like you really just throttled back all the investment in the resource recovery plant to basically what needs to be done to operate until a different. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, we're lack of a better term, keep the wheels on it and keep it operating. Ultimately, we're looking towards July 1, 2027 of having the switchover. So that's 2.5 years, which seems like a long time, but it's going to come pretty quick. So we just need to keep the things operating the way they are, and past that date, we'll let stuff fail as it happens.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great.
Okay.
Very good.
So our transportation system, obviously there are a lot of programs within the transportation system that take care of all of the community needs as far as the transportation across the city. Pages 95 through 104. And what I'd like to highlight here are some of the larger programs to give council an idea of what projects we're specifically looking at. I'll start off with the asphalt street pavement improvements. This program typically targets residential streets. As you see on your screen, we've got Oklahoma, Delaware, Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois, which are all in the western part of Ames. All these streets have reached their useful service of life, and so they're time to be reconstructed or replaced. And those are typically done with our asphalt street pavement improvement program. Our concrete pavement improvements, we have 3 projects this year for 25-26, Campus Avenue, Sunset Drive, and Clark Avenue. And all 3 have varying levels of deterioration, but they've all reached their service life again. And with these, we also look at, I know Sunset Drive is one. We have some water main and some sanitary sewer improvements we're going to do along with that as well when we plan these out.
Is that Sunset Drive being done in conjunction with the stormwater work on Sunset Drive?
Yes, yes, correct. And the last transportation project I'd like to point out is our Collector Street improvements. So this is Bloomington Road from GW Carver over to about Eisenhower Avenue. And this is the 4-lane section of Bloomington Road, if you're familiar with the area in North Ames. That street itself also needs a little bit of an improvement. So with that, we'll also be looking at pedestrian enhancements at Stang and Bloomington as well as we work through that corridor.
Can I stay on that for a second?
Absolutely.
So, it may be just me, but it seemed like our street projects took a long time this summer. West Lincoln Way was a long haul, North 24th, long haul. Would we ever consider in the construction contracts that we let having a timing aspect of that on those? Is that something we would consider?
From a timing standpoint, can you?
It's the time of construction to completion.
So all of ours would have an end date on them. All of our contracts have an end date. And sometimes we look at what we've had to do in the past couple of years is really kind of extend that in order to get bids that have been reasonable from the contractor standpoint. We went through a portion there during COVID where it was contract prices really skyrocketed. So in order to fit better in contractor schedules, we had to give a little more time for the contractor to do the work. I think we're kind of past some of that. So I understand the frustration with some of those projects. We see it too. Part of it is I'd say the scope of the work that we really took on the past calendar year.
No doubt. Those
Yeah.
were some big projects. And so just so we can communicate this to the public, there's a trade-off. So if we put in some pretty tight construction times, that's going to drive costs up on the projects. Whereas if we create some greater leniency in the length of the projects, giving the contractors some opportunity with limited labor supplies to move them around, we're going to get better bids. Am I saying that?
That's
accurately?
correct. That's correct. That's been the trend, at least in the past, I'd say 24 months, we've seen that.
Okay. And one more question on this piece. So, are you interacting with Iowa State in terms of their capital improvements on the institutional roads? Are they investing at the same levels as they have in the past?
I don't know that I could speak to that directly. Yes, we do communicate with them and we do coordinate with them at least quarterly, if not more often. I would say they have some institutional roads that obviously impact a lot of City of Ames traffic that we've expressed some, they are deteriorating at accelerated rates as well. But I can't speak to their necessary level of investment in that without them being here.
And this is a bigger topic than we have in the space. I want to keep the conversation going, but here, my concern just as one council member, if the state chooses or needs to pull back some on its funding for these institutional roads, that impacts the community. And it just seems like there should be some place for us to have substantive conversations about. We've had a very great relationship with Iowa State, I think, in terms of this shared maintenance. But if something changes on their side, I just hope there's a place for us to have those kind of conversations. And I don't know that that's happening, but Stang is an example.
Mhm.
Stang is not holding up well, and it's a major corridor in my ward. And so the curbs have deteriorated. It's in very, very bad shape. So let me just leave it like this. If my hope is that if there was a change of the commitment to institutional roads, that you would come back to us and mayor and a manager could engage in conversations with them about that. I just want to make sure that we're able to have frank conversations about that investment.
Yeah, we'll continue to engage them staff to staff. And if we see that, we can bring it back to the city manager to have that conversation with council as well.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah, I
You bet.
think Mortensen Road is another example of that gets a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
And it's institutional road, a lot of it,
Right.
right by the middle school.
And maybe just a point of clarification, Justin, too, is that we don't get tens of emails, but we do get emails from people. And it seems like there's a little more of a trend of just a complaint about how long street projects are taking.
Understand.
And so we just, I think Tim's question was just to kind of help us be able to respond to it, because it, frankly, it does seem like it's taken, longer we can explain why it doesn't start until mid to late May, because you don't want to essentially start before students, or some students depart for the summertime. But I think some of the dragging on, some projects seem to go pretty quickly. They really get after it. And Oakwood Road's a good example. I thought that went quite quickly in terms of what they, did accomplish. But we're just trying to be prepared to be able to, respond back to the to the feedback we're getting.
Absolutely.
And what's interesting is that feedback is also, we want to see improvements. The satisfaction survey says we want road improvements to continue. So it's kind of like this, it's both. I was trying to find it. We are on track for doing South 16th.
Correct.
From University over to where it's 2-lane going to 4-lane, right? Can
Yes,
you
that's
point me
correct.
to where that was again? I think
That would not be in this CIP. That was last year. I think that's fiscal year 24-25. So it wouldn't show up into this CIP here.
so. Is that out for bid right now, or going to be out for bid pretty soon? Or?
It is. I'm not familiar. Mindy, do you know? Is that
You want to?
it's out for bid right now? Is what she says. So
Okay.
we're moving forward.
And I do know from city manager in my conversation with Iowa State, there is a lot of questions and coordination in terms of access to that med as well too. So just sharing that. Won't get in all the details. You're probably aware of it and talking about it, but that's a really key connection for Iowa State. And I will say they really appreciate what we're doing, because Tim, to your point, they don't have the money to put in to do that portion of the road, according to Dr. Winterstein. And so we're going to really enhance it. And that's the first time, I think Steve has mentioned, the first time we've gone in and done an institutional road, but we believe that we contributed to that increase because of South Grand Extension. But with all the football traffic and everything else going on there, plus, I'm glad that you guys are taking care of it and not us, but we'll probably get emails regarding it. So anyway.
Absolutely. We'll take care of it. Okay. Moving ahead with our transportation system, we have the shared use paths projects on the map on the screen in front of you. These projects are on pages 107 through 109. One thing that we do want to bring out is that this CIP, we have an average of about $1.6 million of investment into our shared use path system. And if council recalls, we have a goal of at least 1.2 million. So we've met that goal and even exceeded a little bit in the CIP.
So on that, I just got an email today from someone, and Steve, I forwarded it to you, but you probably haven't had a chance to look through it. It just came in this afternoon. So when you say the 1.6, is that dedicated just to shared use pass, or is that inclusive of on-street improvements that we're sort of lumping in together?
That would be probably all that together. But the thing is, with the on-street improvements, we only look at what is the multimodal portion of that. So only the shared use path portion. So there may be a project where we do painted bike lanes, for example. And just that small amount of money for that would go towards this 1.6 million that we have in there, or whatever we're calculating. If there are projects that have a street project and has a shared use path that's being replaced or added to it, we only take the cost of that shared use path out specifically to do that calculation.
So if you were to tease out and separate those, what do you think we're spending? And if you don't know now, that's okay. But what do you think we're spending just on exclusively shared use paths?
Off street?
Correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
Off street only. Probably.
First,
I say I
first and third.
I think it's probably the numbers that you see up there is the 825,000, the shared use pass system expansion, and the shared use pass maintenance.
So 825.
For this
The
year?
first and the third.
So yes, the 825 and the 375 below it. But I'd also caution you that there are also street projects that have shared use path components on it that don't show up here. So if you read through some of the details in the CIP locations, there will say a project might be $1 million to reconstruct a street, and we are spending $250,000, for example, on a shared use path in that specific project. And we call those out specifically, so we bring attention to it because we know that's important to the public and important to the council. And then we can also go back and review to make sure we've got the right numbers adding up when we do this calculation.
So maybe afterwards, not now, if there's a way of segregating those dollars and if you could just shoot us an email back, that would be super helpful, just so I can we can communicate accurately.
Yeah, I think we've included a page 106, which I think breaks out exactly what you're looking for. And I think that's a historical slide. So page 106 has the street improvement, shared use pass system improvements, and then traffic improvements, and it breaks out each dollar allocation by each.
So Corey, where it says shared use path system expansion, that is the new paths that are being constructed that don't exist right now. Is that correct?
And I apologize. So what number is
Page
that?
106.
I'm right there.
Look at the left-hand column right below the,
So,
The first.
no, the bolt.
so that total,
This is
Right.
expansion.
right?
It says shared use path system expansion right underneath system.
Mhm.
That's the new then.
Really, the projects that would not, on that page 106, that would not be in that necessarily would be the multimodal roadway improvements.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them are likely, and then the traffic signal program. But what we can do is we can take a look at this and we can bundle that back up together and get the information out to you to make sure it's the right information for you so you can respond.
Great, thank you.
Project to highlight here in the shared use path expansion is along South Dayton Avenue. This is a much needed network connection north and south on the east side of town. There's a recently constructed shared use path along East Lincoln Way that ties in on the north end. And then we do have shared use path along Southeast 16th. So this will tie in the network and give us a north-south connection to that in fiscal year 25-26.
What's this a picture of?
That picture is of Dawes Drive. So what we're indicating there is we do have a separated bike facility there, and a portion of this will have that same separated bike facility that you see there. There will be some
on Dayton Road?
Yes.
Will look like this?
It was similar with the median.
That's
shared
what I
use
meant.
path.
Yeah, not all the trees and everything. But
Yeah. Yes, yes, with the median there.
Is there any way to move Skunk River Trail, East Lincoln Way to Southeast 16th Street up from 2029, 2030 to do that sooner? To me, it just seems like you drive out there, you bike out to Ada Hayden, not Ada Hayden, Hunziker, go under 30, go up to 16th, and then it's kind of not a whole lot. And just what a cool trail system that would be if we could connect. Is that something that's because of budget or because of access of ability to access the property to do that?
It's a little bit of both. So right now we are currently working with the property owners. I know we've been working for a number of years to get that in place. One of our traffic engineers, Mark Ganson, has been working on that specifically, I know within the past month, to try to get the required easement so we can go in there and make the construction happen. So that's one of the things that's driving it. And the other thing is the the financing of it. We can move some things around. If we can get an agreement on the easements, we can look at if it makes more sense to move that up. I understand that's a priority for the council and for the community to get that going. We concur.
Yeah, I think that becomes a council, ultimately their decision, but it just seems like in terms of that southeast part of the community, that'd be a dynamite addition, and it also connect to a really cool path that was built on along Iowa Creek and make it more. But anyway, it's just like, oh, it's another 5 or 6 years out, it's just, it'd be nice to see that. But I also understand maybe this planning, you logically want to do these other ones first because they fit with street projects or something else too. So.
And this project in specific is one that'll at least give us a north-south connection in that corridor, though it may not go the ideal path along Highway Creek. We can at least get people around now and across from Southeast 16th up to East Lincoln Way without having to go down to Duff. We can
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the South Dayton is going to be a game changer because the South 16th right now, that's a trail to nowhere.
Yeah.
And so being able to connect that all the way up is going to be terrific. And could you clarify, so the Memorial Park to Iowa Creek, that's the bridge that's going to connect with Peggy's Trail? Am I saying that correctly?
Correct.
That's also unbelievable. We've talked about that extensively. Super exciting for this year. Yep. Thanks. Very exciting year.
Part of our multimodal improvements, Wilder Boulevard in West Ames. It's a residential collector street. So it has some increased traffic volumes, and there's been some chronic speeding issues along this area. We received many comments from the public about this. We've put in some 4-way stop signs to try to help calm the traffic a little bit. But looking at what is the appropriate treatment for this, we are working closely with the Federal Highway Administration to develop standards for these mini roundabouts at these 3 intersections there. And it's important to remember that this treatment works in narrow and limited scopes. So this being a residential collector street, the traffic volumes have to be right to really make it work. So we're piloting this. We're going to get the standards set up right and get these installed to help the speeding and the traffic complaints we have out there. And this could lead to future mini roundabouts elsewhere in town if the conditions line up the same. And that's why we want to develop those with FHWA in advance.
Does that affect the 4 properties at that intersection? I mean, we had to expand the curb and gutter?
No, these will fit within the existing right of way that's there.
Really?
Yes.
So you just put a little island in the center, or
and that's some of the stuff we have to figure out what we want that island to look like. Because think about it from an operation standpoint. How do we plow snow? How do we move snow around there? We want to make sure we've got that taken care of. So we've had a lot of conversations operationally with our traffic engineers and how that looks. But the goal right now and the proposal is to have it all within the existing curb lines.
Wow, that'd be pretty interesting.
Continuing in our traffic transportation system here, we've got page 111 to page 116. I'd like to highlight for council the intelligent transportation system. This is part of our traffic adaptive network as well. In the CIP, we have phases 5 and 6, 5 being the upper left-hand side of the screen, the northwest side of Ames, and 6 being the southeast part of Ames to the lower right-hand side of the screen. Those are being fine-tuned a little bit due to grant availability. We've phases 1 through 4 have been 100% funded through grants, and they're getting much more competitive now. So we have to do a little bit of fine-tuning to help us be more competitive in those. But for council's information, phase 1, which is the South Duff corridor out to the maintenance facility on Edison, is in the final phases of testing right now and should go live this spring. Phase 2 is 100% installed, and we expect that to go live possibly this summer. Phase 3 is under construction right now, and phase 4 is under design. So we should later this year being able to see some of these corridor improvements with our transportation system there, and we should be able to measure some of those metrics. They have better metrics than they do in the stormwater side, but we should be able to see some better traffic flow through that.
So that's starting now. I've been curious to know when that kicks in.
It's in the, so what it's doing right now is it's in called the baseline phase. So it's the what if phase, what if everything fails? And what they're doing right now is testing that and make sure that that is in place and it's the right system there. And then it'll start learning. After it's actually learning right now, but we haven't flipped that switch to say now do the adaptive process, because we need to make sure that if everything fails, that it fails back to a state that will not really impact traffic. So that's when we put this in, it was really right around the holidays. So traffic patterns were really messed up anyways. You had a lot of shopping, and then you had a lot of students gone. And so we're trying to get that built up before we flip that switch, but it'll happen here in the spring.
So give me just a couple sentences. So is this a system that is creating an algorithm that is trying to set the lights to maximize the traffic flow, or is it based on sensing the actual traffic so that in essence it's trying to maximize traffic flow based on current conditions? So for example, it's super busy during rush hour, it's going to time the lights to increase the traffic flow. But when it's not rush hour, then it would adjust accordingly. Am I summarizing that properly? Here's Damien.
I'll give it over to the expert.
Yeah, so like so the whole system is going to optimize traffic, and that's a lot of different things. It's minimizing delay, it's making the progression from one signal to the next more reliable, more predictable. And what Justin was talking about is anytime you have an optimization system of some sort, if it's not working, you have to know that, like, if it fails back to something, that it would fail back to a functioning state and not just a total collapse. So the optimization piece isn't active right now, but that's what Justin was alluding to, is where the network is up, everything is connected, everything is talking. We're making sure it's kind of like running a simulation before something goes live, making sure that it will work. And then, yes, once that, and we're confident that it will work for traffic and we can go live and it's fully functional, then it will start to optimize traffic. And it'll actually take in all the detection from each intersection, has very detailed, very robust detection, and it will constantly retime the signals within limits. We always set boundaries. That's part of what the activities that are going now, is setting those boundaries to make sure that it doesn't just go off in one direction and never come back, kind of thing. So,
and so when is this supposed to happen? When will this go live?
well, I think like any system, I mean, this is the hard part right now. The hard part is getting the first phase set up. There's way more than I ever thought we were going to get into, but it's a complicated system. It's a great investment for our community. And so the first phase, getting all the switches configured, getting all the software configured, making sure that we're confident, working with our consultants who are experts in these fields, that it's ready to go and ready to go live, because we're not experimenting on the public. We want to make sure it's ready to go in a safe manner. So there's a lot of time that has to go into this first phase. Once this is set and we're confident and it's working, I think you'll see a rapid implementation of the other phases. It's just the first step that's the hard part.
So, but it's this year. It's this summer, this spring?
Yeah, like Justin was saying, phases 1 and 2 are connected. The network's up and running. Everything's talking. It's just not ready to turn on the adaptive piece of the network.
And you'll give us all these little passes we'll have green lights whenever we drive these roads? No?
Only police and fire have those passes.
Okay.
But yeah, I think our plan is, once we're confident that things are working the way we expect them to, that we also had plans to do press releases so that not just council knows, but the public knows that, hey, it's up and running.
Well, congratulations. This has been a project you've been working on for a long time, so it's cool to see this rolling out.
Yeah, and it's really, I should say, it's really great to have the DOT's support, like Justin said, through the grant funding. That's been really key for us.
Yeah, cool.
I had a quick question too while you're there. It was just about, I mean, I think this is a fascinating system, and I was curious, we can alter preference. It would give different modes in terms of like pedestrian, optimizing pedestrian versus bicycle versus automobile traffic, things like that. I mean, if we wanted to, not to say we would do that, but I was curious. I noticed the light the other day, and that 9th and Grand stoplight responded almost immediately to the push button, where it doesn't always. And I was curious, like, could we set it so if it's a certain temperature, it prioritizes pedestrians versus automobile, like to get people out of the cold faster if they're walking. Anyway, that was just a question that made me think, like, oh, maybe it's temperature. And I was like, no, it can't be on yet. But is that something that's within its capability?
I think the short answer is, like anything, you probably could get it to operate in any kind of priority.
Interesting.
I think setting those priorities, like anytime we've talked with council about how we manage our transportation system, there's a lot of kind of pre-baked in priorities that we're working with across the entire system.
Sure.
The reason why I think you're seeing things like Ninth and Grand, because Grand, the phase 3 is the Grand corridor. So while the contractors are working on installing all these things, we have to take them out of normal operation. So you'll probably see a signal, you probably see a little bit of that when we get to West Lincoln Way, that there's some odd operation while they're implementing, because they have to change out the controllers, they have to change out a lot of hardware to make all this work. But I would say that all the system collects a huge amount of data about cars, bikes, peds, it counts all the different modes. And then we can start to look at how are each one of those performing. Like one of the examples that tie in with the bike ped master plan was that we wanted to track mode share. Like kind of like how good is the investment in trails changing and shifting the modes? Well, this ITS network will collect modal data that we can track that for. So there's lots of different operational performances, we can say, like how long people are waiting at certain times of year could be one of them.
Neat. Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. That's awesome.
When you said fail, I thought, okay, so I mean, you're going to be out there and you're going to be out there in the intersections, basically directing traffic, or how far do you
We try to
fail back
avoid
to?
that.
What's that?
We tried to avoid that.
All of Public Works is out there basically,
During the derecho, we had to do that though. We had a bunch of stop signs we put out there, and it's what happened. So we'll make do.
Thank you. Thanks, Damien, for the description and
Yeah, thank you, Damien.
explanation. And I agree. This is pretty exciting to be on this system, and it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I think you'll be excited about this one too. I think we all hear about 13th and Grand.
Oh, yeah.
And here it is in the first year of the CIP. So what's on the screen there is an illustrative project for dedicated left-hand turn lanes and all 4 approaches of the intersection. So with this right now, preliminary design is kicking off as we're looking to get the necessary easements for this project. With getting the easements can obviously be a challenge, but we're hopeful this project can go to construction in 2026. But I know it's something that's been coming a long time. A lot of people are looking forward to it. It's one of the things we hear most about when we do our resident satisfaction survey. So we're all excited about this one too. Our traffic signal program, we have aging, obviously, traffic signals across the town. And so this program goes through and allows funding for replacement of those. And when possible, we do try to get ahead with some of the infrastructure. This location for the CIP is South Duff and South 3rd. We're able to get the footings and conduit in the ground ahead of time. There's a long lead time for traffic poles and traffic signals. So being able to do that ahead of time helps us be more efficient when they do show up. But this is something that we do across the community and prioritize every year which intersections need to be upgraded next. The final part of our transportation program is our street rehabilitation projects. These are pages 118 through 121. And the one project I want to bring to council's attention is normally we like to talk about the first year projects because they're the things you're going to see rather quickly. This project, the Lincoln Way Bridge replacement over Iowa Creek, is actually in year 5 of the CIP. So the substructure of the bridge is actually, parts of it are over 100 years old.
Wow.
And we've had biennial bridge inspections every 2 years that have indicated accelerated deterioration of the bridge. So we've programmed it for full replacement in year 5. That's going to give us an opportunity to look at what options do we need for the bridge, how do we design it, what's it look like. But we want to bring this to council's attention as it's going to be something major that's going to come up here. We'll continue to inspect the bridge every 2 years. If we see anything that necessitates an accelerated accelerated inspection schedule, we would do that and obviously take care of whatever's necessary so the bridge is safe moving forward.
So this is preliminarily, you probably haven't got to this stage yet, but would we take the bridge out in its entirety, or would we do one side at a time so that we could maintain? Because this is obviously a key corridor. I'm trying to wrap my brain around what traffic would do without this. What are your thoughts on that?
So there's 2 schools. It's probably a little early, but to answer your question, there's 2 schools of thought of if you separate the bridge,
right,
it might take you 2 years to do the whole project.
Right.
And if you do it all at once, you might be able to get it done in 9 to 10 months.
Right.
So it's the balance of what's the needs of the community. And this is obviously a question we will bring back to council when that time comes, versus what's the opportunity cost to get it done and get it constructed in that sort of time frame.
Yeah, we took out this when we did south, the bridge over by Brookside.
Yes.
Then we lost that for quite a while, and that was sort of a foretaste, but this is a much more important corridor.
That's 2-lane and this is 4-lane.
Right. Anyway, just food for thought. That'll
Yep.
be something to think about.
Absolutely.
So you're saying some of that support under there is from the last time that bridge was replaced after it collapsed?
Yes,
and,
correct.
Oh,
The,
wow.
if you, it's hard to see in the pictures here. This center portion of the piers is from the 1920s.
Wow.
So it still exists.
Yeah, that wasn't the part that collapsed, right?
It was not. It was not.
That survived.
The final couple slides here tonight, we have the James Herman Banning Municipal Airport CIP pages, 129 through 131. And I want to highlight for council the airside improvements, which is the replacement of runway 119. And this runway will keep the same length as what's currently there. However, we will significantly thicken this runway to handle heavier commercial jets for future work at the airport.
Thought this one was interesting because it looked like such a large dollar figure, but then I see the federal
The
funding
FAA.
part of that.
So-
And so then I was like, oh, okay. But Tim often asks a good question about federal funding. I feel like FAA funding is probably pretty secure, but do you get that sense as we move into the future? Like, do we expect any of these federal funding sources to get harder to get, that?
I think the FAA is pretty hard to get to start with.
Okay.
So the fact that we're along this far is a pretty good sign. I don't know that I can answer much past that.
Sure.
But the fact that we're starting preliminary design. These are obviously FAA grants that they give you. We feel very confident that we're in a good shape for at least this project here.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Well, and
Can you comment on what impact will that have on the jet traffic? I mean, we have a fantastic FBO, now, and they really are getting known for, good fuel prices, good service. They've invested more in terms of equipment out there. I think it's really becoming a great engine for our community. When I saw this project the other week, I thought, oh my gosh, full tear out, because that is our main runway and you can land bigger planes on it.
Correct.
And the other runway obviously is shorter. So can you talk about the impact and how long that would be, and is that going to route traffic to Ankeny then, or what's going to happen?
I think we're in the consultant design process right now, so I don't know that I have the exact impacts, but you are correct. When we get to that intersection of the crosswind runway with 119, there will be some impacts with it. When they're working to the south or to the left side of your screen there, obviously that's not going to impact traffic on the crosswind runway. We can still utilize that. However, there will be likely some jets that may not be able to land here just because of the length of the runway. So we have to be careful of how we design it and how we implement it, so that way we can have as minimal impact as possible. However, in order to increase that traffic that the FBO is recruiting and desires, we have to have that thicker runway in order for those heavier jets to land.
So is there any estimate how long that project will take? Is that a year project to tear it out and put it in, or is it less than that? Or?
I do not have that right. I don't know, Damien, do you have any detail on that?
It'll take less than a year. If you do it all at one time, we close the entire runway, tear it all out, replace it. And we've had discussions with our FBO for 18 months. We've known this is coming, working with the FAA to try and get funding secured. Their preference is that we close it. The FBO doesn't like the idea of closing it partially for half a year and then another half a year.
Right.
That also sends kind of a mixed message of ambiguity to the charters that come into our town. So our goal is to do it all at one time.
Yeah, and then you'll also have several private several private jets there that are actually using it quite a bit. The memory escaped me, but there's a brand new hangar out there with like 3 or 4 private jets that are stored in there. So anyway, I mean, great project. And Brown one, I saw the price, and then I saw, well, the funding looks pretty good. So, but
Well, it illustrates just how dependent we are on federal dollars to make projects like this work. We couldn't
of
do
this
on
size,
our-
absolutely.
we couldn't do this on our own.
Correct. So that concludes our presentation tonight. And are there any additional questions that we can answer for you?
I had one question. I've had several questions on road diets. So are we looking at any roads where in the next year that there will be taking a 4-lane and turn into a 3-lane, or any kind of road diets on the near future on any major arterial roads?
I don't know of any in the first year of the CIP. I'd have to look back if we were looking at other locations. Obviously, it's a technique and a tool that's dictated based off of traffic volumes more than anything, and then turning movements with those. I don't have anything specific that I can recall off my head, but I would say it's something that does from time to time make engineering sense. But we would obviously bring that to council as part of the project to say, hey, this is a possibility that we're looking at, so we can get some feedback from council.
Yeah, I mean, this has actually generated a lot of heat from constituents, and I just want to have a public conversation. And it may make engineering sense, but our ability to articulate that, it doesn't do us a lot of good trying to communicate to the public who's mad that we've taken a 4-lane and turned to 3-lane.
Absolutely.
So I just want to make sure that we're having that conversation up here.
Certainly.
I did one more question. Maybe Damon can answer it. Again, I think this airport, we underestimate the value that it brings in terms of it's the first impression corporate individuals, see coming in. Can you explain what the central entryway green space landscaping? It just seems that the entrance could really use some sprucing up, the trees, and maintenance. Do you have any? I know there's a placeholder there for it's $100,000, I guess, for the central entryway. I'm just wondering if there's a visioning that's been done or planning. I just think we have that nice new sign, out there, but just really making it look nice, and also the medians on both sides. And there's been a few people I've talked to have complained about and they went out there themselves, cut the brush down because of the turning. I'm just thinking about what you have envisioned for for that entryway and then the pathway that's going up to the parking lot.
Yeah, so we have I think it was this current fiscal year, we have around $680,000 in bonds to rebuild the street. So the portions of Airport Drive, which is essentially the entry road in that kind of circular driveway.
Mm-hmm. Also, that whole driveway get redone?
Yeah, because there was pieces that was done with the terminal. I think Summit replaced a small part of the road.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still a remaining pieces of that road that are pretty old that need to get replaced. And we knew at the same time that we would have some parking lot expansion, and that, yes, that the entryway to our entryway, if you can think about it that way, of the airport needed some TLC. So that's why we put in a budget. We would have a landscape architect design it.
Okay.
But we didn't include what I would consider a large visioning. It would just kind of follow good practices for landscaping, kind of like what you would see in a private development.
Well, I'm just saying there's some pretty mature trees there too. Maybe Gabby Douglas could go out there and look at that and look at doing some trimming and just get it really freshened up. But it's taken great shape, and there's a lot of people put some money out there. So it's just I'm looking forward to seeing it become it already is looking great, but it just even looking better.
I think after the road and the landscaping project, it'd be very hard to recognize it compared to what it looks today.
Well, and honestly, taking that farm fence out and all the work you guys had done in terms of cutting those trees and that brush down, I had people just say, man, what is going on? It looks awesome. It just looks so good. So now it's just more or less maintaining it. And when keeping that fence line, the ground sterilized so stuff doesn't grow up when it goes in, it made a huge difference. So kudos to you guys. It's going to be, when's the fence go in? I see there's marking. Is that going to start going in pretty soon, the new fence?
They won't be, they're going to start here this spring, as soon as the ground allows them to install the footings for the fence. But
Okay.
all the clearing and grubbing needed to happen over the winter for environmental reasons. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
John, next time, please don't talk so much, I guess. You know.
Thanks for your work, John.
Yeah,
Is
congratulations.
this your
to you.
last meeting tonight, John?
And I'll be back next week.
Okay.
Is that when they have the balloons and the puppies come in and everything? Or?
Right.
Yep.
Should we take a 20-minute break now? And
You're gonna have to talk to Steve.
so that was for Amber's benefit because
Yeah.
I like that.
the stare would just kill me essentially. So, 'cause we only had
What,
like
2-minute break.
we had like 10-minute page. We have 10 pages left, and we're going to just take a break.
She
for half-
watching the game.
No.
Hi, Barb. Go ahead. Are you going to show YouTube videos too?
No. So good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to start by introducing the people I have with me. So I have Cheryl Spencer as my Vanna, and then I have Rob Jennings, who has helped put the CIP together. So the SIRIDE portion of CIP starts on page 122 and was approved by the Transit Board in their December board meeting. So over the next 5 years, we have approximately $26.6 million programmed for capital projects. And when we developed the CIP, we took a conservative approach really to ensure adequate future funding for critical projects. The projects also support SIRIDE's goal of connecting people to the community with safe and efficient transportation that exceeds customers' expectations. And it also aligns with the city's climate action plan by focusing on reducing carbon emissions and supporting a more sustainable community. Implementation of the transit portion of the CIP relies heavily on securing federal and state funding. Approximately 75% of the $26.6 million is expected to come from those sources. So when we prioritize capital for SIRIDE, we really focus on two key areas: vehicle replacement and rehabilitation, and then building improvements and expansion. Maintaining our fleet is obviously essential for safety and reliability, and it helps us comply with FTA, the Federal Transit Administration's regulations. And then when we look at building improvements and expansion, we look at enhancing safety, air quality, energy efficiency, and those all support environmental goals. Together, those two categories account for about 94% of our capital, or about $25.1 million. So vehicle rehabilitation and replacement begins on page 123. Over the next 5 years, we do plan to replace 25 large vehicles, including 20 older 40-foot heavy-duty buses with newer, more efficient models. And then sustainability remains a priority for both SIRIDE and obviously Council. So we will continue to focus on integrating additional battery electric buses into our fleet to support those efforts. So currently we have 2 battery electric buses in service, with 5 more anticipated within the next 12 months. And then the CIP also includes funding for 5 additional. So 1 each year is programmed through FY 29-30. And that would bring our total to 12 battery electric vehicles. In FY 25-26, we did receive grant funding to allow us to buy 6, or to replace 6 older 40-foot buses with those newer, more efficient models. And then we also secured grant funding from the Federal Transit Administration and the Ames area MPO to replace a 40-foot diesel bus and upgrade it to a battery electric bus. Additionally, under the bus replacement and rehabilitation, we do have programmed the replacement of 1 SIRIDE support vehicle. So SIRIDE building improvements and expansion is on page 124. Approximately $4 million is programmed over the next 5 years. We were awarded a state grant for a fire suppression system to mitigate battery fire risk. So this project will upgrade the sprinkler systems and add a fire door where the battery electric buses are parked, obviously to enhance safety. In FY27, we've budgeted a fuel system upgrade that will provide spill-free fueling, reduce waste, and be more environmentally sustainable. This project depends heavily on our ability to get either state or federal funding for it to move forward, which we are actively looking at and pursuing. And then we have a facility expansion program for FY27-28 through FY29-30. Currently, SIRIDE has $3.7 million in reserve for future facility improvements. And again, the completion of this project will really depend on securing discretionary grant funding as well. Next, we have shop and office equipment on page 125. So each year we program funding for the replacement of office and computer equipment, as well as specialized tools and equipment really critical to our maintenance division. In FY25-26, you can see here what we've included. One of the replacements is our fluid reels. They're shown here, which have reached the end of their useful life and need upgrading. We also have planned in FY25-26, SIRIDE maintenance plans to invest in a self-contained snow blower to improve efficiencies and safety during snow removal at our facility, bus stops, and our turnarounds. And then currently, SIRIDE has one location equipped to service our 60-foot articulated buses, and that's what's pictured here. With our articulated bus fleet growing to 10 by the end of FY25-26, we have budgeted an additional articulated lift here so that we can meet those maintenance needs. The next section of the CIP is bus stop improvements, and it's on page 126. Each year, we do allocate funding for amenities like shelters and benches to enhance the rider experience. We will continue to use automatic passenger counters to focus, to help us improve amenities for the highest number of riders, sorry. And we also budgeted annually small concrete replacement for accessibility and safety reasons. And then transit technology improvements are on page 127. We will continue to invest in technology to improve accessibility and the rider experience. These investments ensure that we can deliver the services that the community relies on. In FY25-26, we have $50,000 budgeted to enhance passenger-facing information. This past year, we did introduce the Transit app, which is an additional app that we offer that shows real-time bus information. And then shown here, we launched this just yesterday, Token Transit, and we've already had our first user, Browen. So not you, maybe, but somebody. So this allows passengers to purchase digital tickets or a monthly pass on their phone. And I think these tools have improved our schedules, making them more accessible and provided more flexible payment options for people, making SIRIDE more user-friendly and accessible. And then we'll continue to, I usually mention this, integrate interior infotainment monitors, which are shown here. Those provide that real-time information on the upcoming stops and transfer points. It assists new passengers, and really it helps with accessibility for everybody. And they can be used for advertising, so it could create additional revenue source for us, and they are 80% federally funded. So that concludes the transit portion, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'm so excited about that app.
I know.
So, and we can, I can start telling people, right? Since it's
Yes.
all rolled out and everything. Awesome.
Yeah, the benefit to that app, it will not replace. You can still buy tickets and monthly passes, but the nice thing is that monthly pass will be a rolling month, opposed to now, if you buy a monthly pass, it's valid in January, expires February 1st. This pass will be 31 days. So if you bought it today, January 21st, it would expire on February 21st. So that gives people who maybe get checks at different times more opportunities to purchase the passes.
So Barb, tell us about what you're hearing from your peers about the concern with federal funding. So DOGE's goal is to cut $2 trillion out of the federal budget. And I think it's naive to think this is not going to impact transportation. And I was just going through here, new buses, 80 to 85% federal funding. Even the bus stop improvements are 80% federally funded. So it's hard for me to imagine a SciRide without federal funding. What are you hearing from your peers? Is this something that's being discussed? And if it is, is your team thinking about a contingency approach to budgeting that, I mean, it's sort of hard to budget for what you don't know, but could you give us some sense of just sort of the thought about federal funding right now for transportation?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question. On the state level and even on the national level, obviously, we've heard those same kind of comments as to what you just said. I don't know. I struggle to answer that because I honestly don't know the answer. I told Mayor Hala I'm going out to DC the end of February to try to find out a little bit more what's happening. SciRide does have some nice cash reserves that we could use in the interim as we tried to figure this out. SciRide has always done a good job of being very efficient. So I think that there are opportunities as far as some of those things being federally funded. Some of those don't come directly. They come through our elderly and disabled funding. So like bus stop improvements, for example, and those infotainments, that would be Section 5310 funding that didn't, it's called Section 5310 elderly and disabled funding. It hasn't gone up substantially under any administration. It's grown slightly, but not substantially. So we're able to use that. Whatever we don't pay for our HERDA services, we can use to do non-traditional projects that could support elderly and disabled things. So those signs, for example. I'm not sure I answered the question.
no,
It's a difficult question to answer.
It really is, and it's sort of unfair for me to ask the question. It's more just to get us thinking. One just sort of follow-up question. If we didn't have the federal funding, is it fair to say that that would impact the choices of buses that you would make? So instead of buying more expensive electric buses, we would go with more traditional diesel fuel buses, at least for a while. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think that's accurate. I mean, a battery electric bus, while we will continue to buy them as we can get grant funding, it is about $1.2 million. And if you remember, part of the reason we're doing the B100 pilot project is to see if that's a stopgap for that greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So it is a lot, it's a lot less infrastructure needed to do that, cost infrastructure. SciRide has always been good at maintaining our fleet. It speaks well of our maintenance division. We have buses that are 22 years old. I'm confident that if something happens, we get about $4 million from the federal government. So, I mean, it would be, I hate to even say anything on record. I think it would be hard for me to imagine that they would cut all of our funding. You know, the top 10 transit agencies depend a lot on federal funding, right? SciRide is fortunate to have 3 local funding partners that also contribute. So while SciRide would look different, I don't think it would be as different as you might see in maybe those top 10s.
Yeah. Well, we are very proud of our SciRide system. It's one of the really cool things about this community. And we think about it predominantly for students, but I'll just share one quick anecdote. I have a friend who does not drive. He's about 80 years old, lives in West Ames. He gets to and from Food at First completely by SciRide. He couldn't live in Ames if it wasn't for SciRide. And so there are lots of people like him. And I appreciate very much the courtesy that our drivers extend towards people who have disabilities and challenges. And I've just been thinking about Kurt and just how he is so dependent on this. So I want to ensure the future of SciRide for people like Kurt and our students. It's a very important component. But thanks for your work with that. I wanted to have an initial conversation on that.
Thanks for the story.
Can I add a thought too?
Oh, please, yeah.
I would just say that I think a lot of the need for spending is driven by federal requirements too. And so, you know, like in terms of turning buses over, it's federal requirements that make us have to upgrade these buses. Like we could probably get more useful life out of them technically through good maintenance, like you said.
Right.
But we have targets we're required to meet by the feds. So it could be the case that if they withdraw funding, maybe they lessen those targets too. And so that would maybe offset that a little. Just a thought.
That's fair. You're good.
Thanks for sharing the story.
Yeah.
I have just one question on their project. Did the fuel system upgrade, for some reason it sticks in my mind that we did a fueling system project here recently. Is that correct? Is this an additional one, or am I just, am I totally off, just forgetting something?
You remember parts of it. Yeah, it's actually been in the CIP. We've just carried it forward. We haven't actually done it. It's one of those projects that, when we do those, like I said, facility improvements, we look at safety first. So what's the safety? Then we kind of look at air quality. Then we look at efficiencies and environmental things. So the safety first. So this project was moved back, and that fire suppression system was moved forward because the risk of having those battery electric buses without adequate water and a fire door is greater to Cyride demise, really, right? So what the hope there is to contain a fire, keep it in that part of the building if that was to happen. It's not likely, but if it would, that could be catastrophic. So that kind of took precedent over the fuel system. The fuel system that we have was put in 2003, so it is in need of an upgrade, but we haven't really done anything with it. And honestly, we're going to kind of look and see what happens with that B100 pilot project as well. Those tanks are above ground. If it's successful, which preliminarily we've seen good results from it, we would look at having a B100 tank underground probably, so it could be heated.
And when you say fire sprinkler system, I presume that you've got a fire engineer that's looking at that, because I may not be water, maybe some other kind of suppression, because of the fact that lithium and electric fires are probably not as easily put out with water as they would with some kind of a chemical. Is that, I presume? Is that
Yeah,
right?
architect and engineering, on-call architect engineering has looked at that. We've also had the fire department there to kind of look at it and give
Right.
us their insight as well.
And is there a smoke evacuation system also included in this in terms of, I know you said to have an exit door, which is great to get people, I presume it's a man door essentially to get out in that area.
Yeah, so this grant, we got a public transit infrastructure grant, which is called a PTIG grant from the state of Iowa. The most you can get in that grant is $750,000. So once architect and engineering finishes that, we'll look at what the cost is. We'll make that project fit the $750,000 we got, but it is quite possible that that will be a project for next year, and we'll apply for a grant next year for that. And then again, that's then how we then delay that fuel system, is if that needs to be split into 2 phases, then we would split it into 2 phases. So I don't know the cost estimate at this point. I mean, that gave us a preliminary so we could submit the grant, but I think it needs some fine tuning.
Well, I think that we're all supportive of the electric batteries, but I think that we all knew that it had some contingent projects, and fire suppression is another one, and the smoke evacuations, my guess, is another one, and your power systems. So the good news is once it's put in place, it can be used for multiple buses, but it sure adds up, doesn't it?
Yeah, and when we go after the facility grant, which we will apply for a facility grant again, we were unsuccessful last year in getting that. We did put the fire mitigation stuff for battery electric buses as well to maybe move them to that part of the facility. So if that's helpful.
How many hours do we have, or years do we have on our first electric bus?
It went into service in June of last year. Does that sound right? I think June of last year.
And
Yeah.
how would you summarize the operation, and also is there any kind of a gauge in terms of battery life? Because we talked about, or you mentioned and talked about the cost of replacing batteries. Or is it all going real well and you don't have any idea?
I mean, it's like any new technology, right? Any new technology, there are always some technical challenges. So we've had some challenges. One bus was down for a major component failure. If James was here, he could tell you exactly what it is. It was under warranty. They came and fixed it, but it didn't run for a month as they were trying to get the part and get it to fix. We've had some problems with the charging systems. We're working through those. I mean, I would say that all in all, it's been a successful project. CTE was an outside consultant that came and evaluated those battery electric buses for us. It has reduced greenhouse gas emissions. It's a small window of what they looked at because it hasn't been running for quite a year. But yeah, I think it's been a good project. Again, I'm going to lean into that B100 pilot project. Again, that has had some challenges as well. I will tell you preliminarily, the greenhouse gas reductions we've seen have been similar to what we have seen in the battery electric buses. And we're working with Nolan here to help us quantify that so that we can really understand that better. But again, we've had some challenges with that as well.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you. You guys have a nice
Coming.
night.
Thank you. Parks and Rec, Keith.
Don't ask me. I can't find the arrow here. Can't find the arrow. Let's go over the top of it. The arrow is gone. There we go. All right. Well, good evening, Mayor and City Council. We'll kind of go through. There's a lot of projects, starting on page 135. Not going to touch on everything that we have there. I'm just going to highlight some of the bigger projects and maybe some of the things that we'll do some shared funding on. But the first one, obviously, is the Fitch Family Indoor Aquatic Center. That's what the finished product will look like. Do have a couple of pictures of seeing some good progress. That's kind of looking to the northwest. These were just taken last week, so. With the natatorium, all of I should say, of the precast panels are up. There is an area in the southwest corner that they'll use for ingress and egress to get trucks and equipment and stuff in and out. But you can see the steel is up. They're putting the decking on, and once the decking's on, then the roofing company will come in and do their thing. And then if you look around to the north side, that area in the bottom right of the picture, that's the mechanical, electrical room. It does have concrete ceiling, which those are already in place. Continue to put all the steel on. Those will be in that area, the locker rooms, and really the locker rooms is going to be a big chunk of that area. And then they'll continue to work around to the east and get the rest of the precast panels up. So a couple of things with the budget, and this is a total project budget that we're showing here. If you remember, which I'm sure you all do, last year at this time we were showing about $32.1 million as the project cost and with funding. Again, because bids came in so well, we're right now showing, just about $28.3 million. So about $3.8 million less than what we were showing last year for expenses. So what that has been, or what we've been able to do with that from a funding standpoint, last year our GEO bonds were about 19 point some million dollars. We're showing, 18.7 or almost that. So we're actually able to lower the amount of GEO bonds. One of the other big things is the Guido Winokur donation. We have just under $2 million in that, and we were going to be using all $2 million of it for this project. Because of, the savings that we have experienced, what we have done is we reduced that to about $270,000, which frees up about 1.7 million. We have taken that out of this, and with that donation does need to be used for parks and recreation, amenities, projects, something like that. So what we have done is we've taken that 1.7 million, we've taken that out, and we could potentially use it for Ontario Park. If there's a phase one, we could maybe do something on the north end. So it gives us some flexibility. One of the other things that we did with this is there was about $868,000 in ARPA funding. That has been pulled out of this as well. And I think that the reason I'm sharing this, I think it's a good story because we don't generally as a city see projects where we're saving money and able to do what we just described. The other thing that is we still do have, about, $3.1 million in contingency and mitigation. We spent about 250,000 of that so far. So based on how the project comes up, if we can keep that contingency spending down, that could free up some money also. And if it's in geo bonds, we could use it for other projects that are maybe short of geo bonds and so on. So I think it's a good story, with the funding. Did I miss anything, Corey?
Nope, you got it.
All right. So that's a good thing. We're excited with project, keep moving forward, and at council meeting next week, Tuesday, we'll give you an in-person, update with Story Construction and RDG, our architect. So on page 137, park system improvements, auditorium sound system, that is, it's outdated. We're not providing what our customers are wanting. It's not meeting when we have bands in there, and we've been having a lot of bands in the auditorium. It's not meeting their needs. So this needs to get updated. And with that one, that's in 25, 26 fiscal year. One of the other things, and this is, we're looking at shared funding with this one, some local option sales tax. Also, we'll apply for some DNR grants. We have 2 canoe kayaks access points. The Skunk River through Story County is a designated Iowa water trail or state water trail. And when that was put together, there were some improvements for all of the canoe kayak launches, and we'll use that, some of those guidelines to improve. The one in North River Valley will take some updating. The one along South 16th Street, right now you can see there's really no launch. It's just dirt. So that'll take maybe a little bit more, but again, that'll be something that we will do with funding, hopefully from the DNR. This is exciting. Playground equipment improvements, a lot of projects, listed there. But at Brookside Park by Hickory Shelter, where that playground is up for replacement. The exciting thing, we have about $75,000 for this project. Noon Kiwanis recently celebrated their 100th anniversary. So they have committed $75,000 to add to our $75,000 to do more of a signature project at Hickory Shelter. And that's where the fire station is. And these are just pictures. We'll do an RFP, but we thought maybe we could maybe try to do something along the fire theme, as well.
It won't say New York though, will it?
What was that?
It won't say New York on the front though, will it?
No. I think we can use some spray paint and put Ames up there instead. No, we'll get it to say Ames. Again, these are just conceptual.
That's a great idea to tie in with the fire engine. That's a favorite of people there.
Yeah. And at some point, that fire station's been there a long time, and we have had to do some repairs. And at some point, it's going to wind up getting to be a safety issue. But I know it's not one of the things that anybody wants to deal with. But the reality is don't know how long that will still be able to stay there for a
We need to get a
usable
new
piece.
one. We can't. City of Ames will shut down if we don't have that in Brookside. So find another one.
Yeah. All right. So with this, one of the other things with playgrounds, again, the surfacing within Miracle Park, 8 to 12 years, depending on usage. So we are starting to put some money in 2 years, in 28, 29, and 29, 30, for, at least putting a placeholder in there that if we do need to start replacing some of this, we can do it. And again, the way it was designed in sections, we can replace one at a time, 2, and so on, and we can phase that out, which will be a really good strategy. So with Ada Hayden, we do have the path replacement, coming up, and in 25, 26 is the 700,000 for the North Lake Trail. In the current year, we have 700,000. We have council has were to contract the WHKS for design, which we're meeting with them on Friday to get things kicked off so we can get that bid. And you can see the items there. And the picture on the lower right is really one of the things that we want to do is have some delineation between the two sides. And again, it might be wheels on the outside, feet on the inside, something like that. We'll look to WHKS to give us some ideas on that as well. So that'll be a big project with it. The other one is a pond renovation, which is up in the north end of the park. And you can see, a couple of different pictures of it. But a couple of things we want to do is we want to make it more of a kid-friendly fishing area. So solar aerator just to keep some of the growth off the pond. We'll probably have to do some dredging of it. And then some type of a fishing dock. And again, this is just an example of what that might look like. So this is one also that we think that we can get a REAP grant on. City our size can get up to $200,000 in a REAP grant. So we feel that this is a really good candidate, and we have included that in the funding sources.
Keith, could you stand that just for a second? So one of the challenges with Ada Hayden is that ultimately it's a quarry. So from a fishing perspective, it's just super hard to make that a good fishing lake. Are there any kind of structural things that you've looked at to help improve the fishing attributes of Ada Hayden?
Yeah, so we did something last year, and we're doing it again this year. We worked with the Ames anglers. They have gone out and they have a source for cedar trees. So last year what they did is they went and cut down cedar trees. We hauled them out to Ada Hayden. And then we worked with the DNR and the Ames anglers and actually sunk those cedar trees in various places, which provide good habitat for fish. They've already cut down more cedar trees for this year, and we're going to be doing the same thing. Once ice is out, we'll probably do it. That's when we did it last year. So those types of things, and I was just ice fishing over the weekend down at Big Creek Lake and talking to a number of fishermen, and every one of them, there's brush piles, and that's where everybody was sitting. So we are doing some of that, and there may be some other things that we can do, but the DNR and Ames anglers have been really good partners in helping us figure out what to do and providing the manpower so it doesn't fall all on city staff.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that. And I love the partnerships that you've created to make that happen.
Yeah, thank you. So ADA transition plan, we put with those improvements, we put money in each year. So a couple of things, that we're looking at, like the one on the left is at the community center. It has the edge. The drinking fountain is not ADA compliant. The spit sink is probably from the 1930s, 40s, something along those lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all that out. And actually what we're going to do is we have two drinking fountains, one on the north end, one on the south end. One of them is going to be a higher drinking fountain, and then the other one on the other end is going to be lower. So it's ADA compliant and accessible stuff. So we're going to work through that. Those are the types of things. The one on the right is up at Ada Hayden. And with that one, you can see the path that kind of goes to the left of that picture. That connects now to the main path, whereas all these mini shelters didn't. We have 6 of them. 5 of them are adjacent to the main path. So we're going to do. We've done 2 of them. We had donations to cover the cost. The last 4 actually met with Friends of Ada Hayden a couple weeks ago, and they put in their budget $14,000 to do the remaining 4 of this. So we'll make those accessible as well. But these are the types of projects that we're looking at, and there's others also. So with more
putting in bottle fillers with all those drinking fountains too, Keith?
We are. Yep. So with Moore Memorial Park, and you can see kind of that where Moore Memorial Park is in the lower left. Again, the bridge finalizing, keep working to get those easements done with Iowa State University. And then again, what we'll do is that red dot is the pedestrian bridge. The white is the trail that will kind of happen initially on the right side of the creek. That will be paved from Moore Memorial down to the bridge. To the left of the creek or the west of the creek, there will just be a mowed path to start with, all the way up to Shoal Road. But eventually, we'll get that paved. It's about a 1.2 mile from the bridge to Ontario. So it is in the long range, the bike plan. Funding hasn't been set aside for it, but we'll continue to work through that aspect. This is another one where we feel a lot of our bridges within the park system have received REAP funding. So we do feel this is another good candidate for REAP funding, and that's reflected in the budget as well.
Steve, is this a duplicate from, because wasn't multimodal path and wasn't there something talked about regarding Moore Memorial Park?
It's page 107.
So
look at the same thing.
So that's just what they have in theirs is the path that's to the right of Iowa Creek. So they have bringing the path from a path in Moore Memorial down to the bridge site. That's what they have.
Okay. One of the same thing.
So yeah, we're the money that we have in our CIP is just focused on the bridge.
Well, I was hoping there's some duplication there. We have some extra money to spend. That was all.
Yeah.
So the bridge will be next year.
Yeah, we'll do design in 25, 26. The bridge will be in 26, 27.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So in Homewood Golf Course, again, safety issues. The bridge has been there for a long time. Right now, it does not accept. It's not. We don't allow golf carts on there, so they have to go against the grain on hole number 8, and then on hole number 1, and so on. It'll help with speed of play. So just as a reminder, for this year, we do have $75,000 that we actually took out of the operational fund balance from Homewood. And we'll talk more about that when we show our budget to you or present our budget in February. But then the bridge replacement will happen in 25, 26 with local option sales tax dollars. With Furman Aquatic Center, we have not done anything with the pool heaters, and we do need to replace them. We did have money already for the 50-meter pool. We added money in for the splash pool in the lazy river. We're going from about 80% efficient heaters to 98% efficient heaters. That includes the heaters as well as the heat exchangers that will be in the surge tanks and so on. So that's what this one is. And this is for 25, 26. So any questions about Parks and Recreation?
So Keith, I may have been under a rock or something, but what's been happening down at Stuart Smith Park?
Yeah. So you're talking with the playground?
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually Joshua Thompson, our Parks and Facility Superintendent, just met with representatives from that playground manufacturer. They're doing the install. So the playground equipment was delivered in the late fall. They were going to come in and do Bandshell and Stuart Smith at the same time. They drugged their feet. They didn't get it done, and now obviously it's not a good thing. So the equipment, they had spread out some of the equipment to get ready for it. That's why Joshua met with them today. Say, hey, this is unacceptable. You need to get in here and do this. And if you're not going to install when you said you were going to install and what we had talked about, then we just won't do business with you in the future. So that was basically the conversation that they had with them today. So we're not pleased with it. But as soon as they can, they'll be out there to get that installed.
Seems like it's been sitting there for ages.
Yeah, it was, I think it was delivered maybe right before Thanksgiving or right around Thanksgiving. It was supposed to be
opened up.
installed. Yeah, yeah.
That's what I don't understand.
Well,
Yeah,
and
it's like the crates are there.
It
The
looks like it's junk essentially.
well,
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out whether something was being put in or something was being taken out or somebody had vandalized what was there. It looks horrible.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So that's what we talked to. Like I said, Joshua talked to him. So with these things, and this is another good story. You guys like good stories. So the old playground equipment with it is we got approached by a leadership Ames group, said that they wanted to work with the new bridge home to supply playground equipment. And do we have anything? So we talked to them. So they actually worked with contractors, I think All Star Concrete and maybe some others. They came in, Leadership Ames provided manpower and worked with these contractors. They disassembled the entire playground and then took it over to the bridge home and then reinstalled it. And then we're able to, our staff goes in, gets the site ready, takes out the old engineered wood fibers, gets it level, do whatever we need to do. Then the company comes in and installs the playground, and then we finish it up with the concrete border. So that's what has happened. We're not pleased with it, and we have the same feelings that, and I'm worried that pieces have walked away.
yeah.
But that's on them. If they have, they're going to have to replace them.
Can they really practically install it now with the depth of frost that's gone into the ground and really do it successfully? Or are they just going to wait till spring? Or
I wasn't able to follow up with Joshua today on what the plan and what they finished up or decided. So I don't know the answer to that question. I think it would be very difficult to do it with the frost right now, especially with the cold.
to
weather
Glory's
that we've been
point,
having.
what staff has noticed, is it just better to tell them, get all that stuff, you haul it to your warehouse, or you provide some warehouse space and just get it so it's not an attractive nuisance,
Right.
and then come back and as soon as ground is thawed and get in there and immediately get it installed. I mean, I agree with you, Gloria. I driven by
Yeah.
when I go home, and it's just like, what goes on? I thought, well, maybe the winter just came in too fast, and I thought the staff was doing it, not an outside
Yeah.
consultant. So anyway,
Yeah, we
glad you
used
asked the
to
question.
we used to do them all, but I'll follow
Just
up
a
with
suggestion-
Joshua
just a
tomorrow
suggestions.
and with it. Yeah, because what we have done is we've done this in the last several years where the playground equipment all used to be delivered to our shop, and then we had to move it. And then there were questions about what if it got damaged and those kinds of things. So several years ago, we went to, hey, we're not going to do this. You deliver it right to the site, and then installation needs to happen within so many days of the delivery. And you have to be on site to make sure that all the equipment is there, it's not damaged. So it's something to put more of the onus on the manufacturer and installer and take some of that off of us. And for the most part, it has worked really well. This has been an exception, but I hear what you're saying, Gloria.
I'm just mystified by the fact that they would deliver it and open it up and start pulling things out and then just leave.
Yeah.
I don't understand that business model.
Yep. No, we don't either.
The good news is band shell looks really nice. Just drove by today, and that new
Yes.
playground equipment looks really nice.
Yep. Yeah, and we'll have to obviously finish up with the concrete border, and then we'll be adding a walkway to the sidewalk on the south end as well. So making it more accessible thing. So
That's one of the most utilized playground areas in our park system is the Band Shell Park.
It
no
is.
question about that.
Yep, it is.
It's just packed with kids when
It
during
is.
the concerts and stuff.
And all the time. Keith, big question. Talk to us about your thoughts on a field house. Tons of people are interested in this. Help us think through from a CIP perspective where that fits in and what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So with it, we've had a lot of interest, in it as well. I know the Parks and Recreation Commission is 100% behind, doing something, with it. We get a lot of requests from the community to do things during the day, whether it's pickleball, whether it's badminton, whether it's open gym, fill in the blank, whatever could be done. And we just cannot do that with one gym at the community center. And obviously, schools are not available. We're not going to be able to get into them at the daytime. And even they're very limited with usage at other times as well. So the need is there. Obviously, the need has been there since we started talking about the Healthy Life Center. Looking at the pool aspect, we've addressed that part of it. Now the piece that is still there from the Healthy Life Center that we haven't addressed is the field house, the gymnasium space, a longer walking track, maybe some other aspects, to it as well. So from a CIP standpoint, I think you'll see this in the budget, money put in the budget for hiring a consultant, kind of what we did with the Healthy Life Center as well. Do a conceptual design, capital costs, operational expenses, potential locations, and we'll get that done and bring that to City Council. And I think then at that time, then we can take a look at how does it roll into the CIP and what the cost estimates are, and then what are the funding sources.
And this is the first I've heard that we're taking that step. So from a funding perspective, we're looking at bringing a consultant in 2025.
Yeah, with some of the other things that we have going on, we'll probably see if we can hire them 24, 25, but most likely it, in 25, 26 would be when we bring something to you. So, and maybe we can get it done, prior to CIP next year, that would be ideal. And that's what we'll shoot for. But that's the idea.
He's already working with a consultant now for the Ontario Park. Remember, a comprehensive plan on that.
Well,
Finishing up.
I just one council member. I would prioritize a field house ahead of the Ontario Park.
Agreed.
Same.
And
Agreed.
I don't know, and I'm very careful because you've got a lot on your plate, my friend, and we all love what you're doing. But if there was any way to accelerate the process of at least getting the consultant in and doing their work, I hope we would support that.
You're gonna, maybe at budget time, you're gonna have to help me. I'm trying to read you on the animal control shelter. It's the top one. But you're gonna have to give me direction. There's 4 other projects, 2 fire stations, the Ontario Park, and the recreation center. You need as a group to give me direction on what the next priority is, and I will work on that. And not as you could also say, well, there are different people running the projects. There are, but they'll probably both will take bond issues. A fire station will take a bond issue in the rec center. How do you prioritize those? There's 2 fire stations, relocation and the new one. New one can wait until development. Relocation we thought would be more immediate. Ontario, it's good to hear now you're kind of crystallizing your thoughts in comparison with the Ontario Park. Perhaps, I haven't heard anybody else speak. I don't want you to speak now, but I think a motion at the budget time will tell us a lot how you want us to focus our attention.
And I'm just one council member, but that's a priority for me.
I think consensus of the council.
I use the city gym a lot, and I continue to see oftentimes kids of color, and it's time for volleyball. It's time for badminton.
Yeah.
They have nowhere else to go to play ball. And we talk about unrepresented groups. Well, I'm telling you what those unrepresented people groups want.
Yeah, no.
They want recreation facilities, and they want them as soon as we can provide them. So I want to push hard for this.
Yeah.
But I'll
Yeah.
tell you, that type of facility has a lot of operating costs. We're going to have to watch the state legislature and pound them with this. If you want to add new amenities, you can't hold us to a 2% growth in property taxes. That doesn't cover what we're doing now, let alone add an additional facility. With the personnel, the utilities, you've got to start, people in these cities have to fight back on this. It's going to eliminate quality of life features or improving them, adding to them. It's going to be very difficult unless we get a handle on this. And I know everybody's trying, but I just think, oh, we'll add this, we'll add this. Well, when they tell us you can only grow 2 or 3%, it doesn't add up. Unless you'll tell me, as I do at budget time, town budget, what do you want me to cut out? Be prepared to cut out something else. So.
Yep. Thank you for those thoughts, Keith. You're
Yep.
doing an awesome job.
All right, move on to cemetery. So we have 2 projects within the cemetery. The first one in 25-26 is replace the fencing out at Ontario Cemetery off of North Dakota. The picture on the left is what the fencing, just chain link. The picture on the right is what we have at Municipal Cemetery. And again, just elevate, the whole look of the cemetery. So that's in 25-26. And then in 27-28 is adding 3 more columbarium. And with it already, we added the 3 just, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Second one is almost full. We'll be into the third one shortly, and that's why we're looking at adding another 3. And that's why when we did that whole project, you can see we're already set up for them. Pads are there. We just need to get them and drop them in there. And that's in 27-28 is that year. So.
Well, you're on the Ontario Cemetery.
Yeah, Ontario Cemetery.
Can you talk a little about? I agree with the fencing. We get that really steep slope hill along Ontario.
Yep.
And it looks like it's very challenging to try and mow and maintain, and also that's really, as you know, that's the front facing. That is the front of the cemetery. Do you have any thoughts on that in terms of what might be able to be done so that it looks really nice? I mean, gosh, I'm a little biased, but the Ames Municipal Cemetery is just fantastic. The entrance, the walls, and everything. And I'm just curious on that. So
So between we have 2 entrances, north and south entrance off of North Dakota. Between those 2 drives, there is a retaining wall along the shared use path, just on the east side of that, and then above that is that steep area. So we actually have $25,000 right now in the CIP. I think it was for this year, 24-25. So staff is working on that and coming up with some ideas and some plans to address that area, because we're with you 100%. That's why we put money in the previous CIP, is because it doesn't look good. And one of the other things that we don't have out there is we don't have a sign either. So there's a few things that we need to do and start doing to make that cemetery look a lot nicer. And it's for some people that go there. For some people, it's an afterthought. But if we can do some of these improvements and make it look a lot nicer, people, I think, will be more inclined to make that their final resting area.
And the other thing is, and I apologize for not mentioning to you before the meeting, Mary and I adopt the Garden of Memories, planter.
Yep.
And so I have intimate knowledge of that. That really needs to be tuck pointed, and it's a beautiful area, and also around the front of the building, which is really a cool building, where the office is. Could some money be put in just to maybe tear out a bunch of that stuff and landscape in front and just do some tuck pointing? And then maybe there's some other stone And it's much cheaper to do it now than if it starts, deteriorating. But I don't know if you've had some
Right.
thoughts on that or look at it or.
So actually, we have had a couple of masons go out and look at the garden of memories,
Okay, good.
that area, and you'll see this. We do have money in the operating budget. We put some money in the operating budget
the
for
budget's coming up.
Yep.
Okay.
For that, and then around the building, that's something that we'd probably just do out of operations.
Okay.
We do with our own staff and do something to kind of spruce that area up.
While the masons are there, are they good? You have some really nice stone piers along, the entrance as well. Maybe have them just take a look at it, and so we can catch it before it goes too far. It'll minimize some of the deterioration.
Yeah.
But it's really very handsome and well maintained.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yep.
all right.
No other questions?
What are you going to do when the Furman Aquatic Center is done and the plaza is done? I mean, you'll have nothing to do, Keith.
I can maybe catch up on all the backlog.
All right, there you go.
That's
All right.
sitting there.
All
But
right.
yeah, I do want to just say thank you to mayor, council, city manager, and the rest of the staff for all they do and for your support for everything we do. We get a lot of comments about the park system, about the amenities that we have, and when people are moving into town, they're just amazed. Somebody just talked to me the other day. They moved here, and it's like, I'm just amazed at the parks and the quality and everything. So thank you for your continued support so we can provide what our residents are looking for. All right. Have a good night.
Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Keith. Page 140.
Take it away.
Thanks, Keith. Page 149, 150, 151.
Do you want to take a break for a few minutes?
We'll bring it home. We've got four more things. Council's always been advocates for neighborhoods. These three projects represent commercial and residential neighborhoods. The projects you've seen before, you increased the amount of money for downtown last year. So we're recommending they continue. And then I don't know if Paul wants to speak on facilities. The last one, facilities, Paul hasn't talked, so she needs to talk.
Yeah, please,
Better
no.
stay up this late.
Yes. This is a pretty standard item. We usually program $75,000 for city hall improvements, so it's there if we have any major breaks that we need to fix or anything like that.
So can you talk about LED lighting and replacement? Is that really planned for in all the corridors and just, offices, just replacing that? I know that's something that would be one, climate action related, but two is it would really, I think, from aesthetic standpoint, we just need some refresh in some of the light fixtures and some of the ceiling tile. Is that something we can start programming in as part of this funding, or what's the thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, they have already started to replace some of the light bulbs. So as they're going through and doing some work on the offices, they've already started that process. So it's
So not replacing
already-
the fixtures,
yeah.
or putting in the new light bulbs?
Yep.
Remember, we're going to hire a consultant that's going to look at all the buildings, and they're going to tell us where the biggest bang for the buck.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be something else. So we'll see. Last but not least, all council should be informed in the state of Iowa of the debt limit. A lot of these projects are going to be paid for general obligation debt. So look on page 8. I'll refresh you and the public of what our debt limits are, how we're handling it. And that will be Corey's.
Great. Like Steve mentioned, we annually provide the proposed debt issuances in relation to debt capacity. So we've labeled the rows with numbers. So if you look on the top left hand, number 1 is total actual valuation. And so that's the city's 100% valuation. You'll notice, kind of interestingly, from 23 to 24 to 24, 25, we had an 18% increase in valuation. That's a result of that change in reassessments that everybody was very concerned about. If you recall, you might also remember that it only resulted in about a 4.6% increase in taxable valuation. So interestingly enough, it comes into play here. Then the city has a 5% cap of the state mandated debt limit. So you would take that row 1, multiply it by 0.05. That's what you come up with. Row 3, the city has a policy of reserving 25% of the debt limit. So you can see the unreserved debt capacity just below row 3 for 25, 26. So the third column over, would be $248.6 million. So looking good there. What we've done in row 4 is we've taken our outstanding debt issuances that we've already approved. So those are debt issuances that we're currently making payments on, and we've run those out to fiscal year 29-30. Row 5 is our proposed issuance. So that will match up to all the GO issuances that we have in the CIP, excuse me, including some utility abated debt associated with resource recovery. And then what we do in row 6 is we run out the debt payments associated with those new projects in row 5. So we make one principal payment in the year that we issue the debt. So that's why there's a negative, that $964,354. That's a debt payment that we make in June. Since we issue our debt in September, we have to make a debt payment or principal payment within 6 months. And so that's traditionally how we do that. Row 7 is the available unreserved debt capacities. So that's the available debt capacity once you take out our self-imposed 25% limit. And you can see for 25-26, we're about 68.6%. That's pretty consistent across the board historically. And then row 9 is our debt capacity without our reserved amount, our self-imposed reserve amount. So you can see for 25-26, we'll be about 76.45%. So all in all, things remaining pretty stable as we make payments on the debt issuances. Last year, I think we showed this slide in context of other cities. So you can see the city of Ames utilizes 23.55% of our debt capacity. And you can see, I believe these are the 10 largest cities, if I remember correctly, in Iowa by population. And so you can see that we're well below the average and certainly below some of the higher areas. You can see 65% for Des Moines, 56 for Cedar Rapids. That's general obligation debt. That doesn't include utility debt. So I think we're in a good position moving forward as we look at the CIP and some of our funding sources.
Corey, one point of reference, isn't Council Bluffs a little distorted because they have a huge amount of gambling money that changes the scope of that? So I mean, do you agree with that distorts them as a comparison?
Well, there's a lot of revenue sources I think that you can take into account, like franchise fees, for instance. A number of these cities incorporate franchise fees into their revenue amount. So they utilize that to pay for capital projects. So I think there's a number of revenue sources that we don't currently tap that other cities utilize to reduce their debt obligations. So I think that's one thing, but I think there's other things as well.
I mean, they're investing. I was just over there. They're investing a lot in infrastructure.
They are.
And
the river walk is amazing.
And so that shocks me that we're seeing a 16% there. So that's telling me it's from was it the West family or whatever, that's the source of the gambling funds. Anyway, just as a point of reference.
Yeah.
That it's not because Council Bluffs is not investing in infrastructure.
No.
Can you go back to your projected debt capacity?
Sure.
I just have one.
Yeah.
How does TIF figure in? Because is that considered?
It does not count towards. It doesn't factor into this equation at all because this is prior. The 5% cap includes TIF, so there really is no. There isn't an impact in this slide unless we were going to issue TIF obligated debt, and we don't have any currently.
So there's been some requests for TIF for projects. So we have you can do TIF rebate.
You can,
right? Which doesn't show up on our debt because basically we're refunding money back to what they've undertaken, correct?
Yes, and I think all of our agreements currently, maybe historically, have an annual appropriation clause. So if you remember in November, I come before you and provide a resolution that you approve and say, yes, you can make this payment.
But if we would undertake some projects and use TIF to pay for it, then that debt would then show up on this ledger. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would it be a separate line, or it would just show up as outstanding debt?
It would. Well, it depends in which year we did it, but it would show up an outstanding debt or the proposed debt issuance, depending on what year it was. I think there are, I'd have to talk to our financial advisor and bond counsel. I think there are other ways that you can structure it so that it only would, the repayment is only by TIF. So in the event that it didn't materialize, it wouldn't be an obligation of ours, but I think the rates are so astronomical that it wouldn't make sense for us to do that.
So when someone comes in and say they want 20-year TIF,
Mhm.
that's just basically being rebated to them. One option, rebated to them
Mhm.
to offset infrastructure costs that they're putting in.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
not all the time.
Pardon me?
Sometimes they just want it into their pro forma to make the project
Right.
work.
But,
Yeah.
but the point is, it's just basically, it's being
It's going back to that.
it's funded back to them, but it doesn't show up as a debt. Okay.
No, because we have the annual appropriation clause.
That's what makes it, yeah.
I just know we've talked before about the fact of just if you take on, if we use TIF for infrastructure projects, that's going to affect our debt essentially. So I'm just trying to see how it all fits in.
I would flow into that calculation, assuming that we
The
issue
thing about
general
TIF is,
obligation.
if you give a 20-year TIF, you don't get general fund money, general
Correct.
levy money. That's not, but it's a debt.
Unless we do the project ourselves and use TIF to redo it, to pay for it, right?
Well, then both things happen. Then it becomes debt and you don't,
Get the revenue.
you don't get the revenue
For
until that
general
debt is
fund.
paid off.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, usually you can't ask for a 20-year debt if the street only, can be paid off in 3 years. So many times when they ask for that, it's a rebate, is what I'm saying. It covers our pro forma. It's their operating costs, however they want to use it. Yep. Which is good. I mean, now we did that differently on Dayton. We did a rebate on the streets and everything, remember? So they took the risk in essence.
All right. Any questions for Corey?
Okay, next week we'll ask for public input, but other input can still be received by the council all the way up till the last council, the wrap-up meeting where you'll be asked to approve the CIP plan. Again, then when you approve that, those first-year projects will be layered into the budget. The next 4 years, as you can see, we moved that alert system in the fire station. Remember that moved from a fifth year all the way to the front based on a change in policy. You may have a change in a bike path next year that has to move forward. So that's why it's a plan, not a budget necessarily.
All right. Anything else for tonight?
Nope, I hope you're impressed with all the work that the staff done. We've got a great team, and I see you'll see them all, even more of them here
In a few weeks.
a couple of weeks with the budget.
All right. We have no disposition of communications to council. So go council comments. Gloria?
I want to thank staff for all the hard work that goes into creating this CIP. And I always enjoy seeing what we're getting. The other thing is I was saddened to learn of the death of Dr. Barbara Woods, who has been a long-time, highly contributing member of our community, former winner of the Ames Humanitarian Award and served on the Human Relations Commission and done so many other things. Her funeral will be coming up here in about a week and a half. And so those who are interested should watch for the obituary in Grandin Funeral Home.
Thank you. Emma, anything?
Just good event last night for Martin Luther King Day. That was great. Good attendance, I thought, despite the cold weather. So just thanks again to the committee that organizes that. And I thought it was a really nice event. So I think that's all I've got.
All right, thanks.
Nothing for me?
Yeah, I want to echo, I want to especially call out Vanessa Baker Latimer. And the committee is helpful, but honestly, it's Vanessa that's the driving force of this. And so the auditorium was almost packed out last night.
Standing room.
I mean, there weren't many seats, and just a really terrific night. Again, given the weather was amazing. And this is one of those nights where I'm just so proud of our department chairs. They are forward thinking. They are scouring the country for best practices. We are so well served. And you get that when we have this concentrated view, we're pulling all these things out and we kick the tires and we ask hard questions. And man alive, I am very proud to serve in a community like this. So we are well served. And Steve, thanks for putting a team together. This is your team you put together. And there's a deep bench. And so thanks for the work that you've done to put this team together.
Thank you.
All right. Entertain motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
I think your pictures are.
Trying to-